3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to the Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League, powered, of course, by Prime Gaming. If you're already an Amazon Prime subscriber, make sure to go check out all of the awesome benefits that Prime Gaming provides your existing subscription. So many cool games. I'll echo the Oblivion comment. You haven't heard my take on it yet. One of my favorite games of all time. And so if you have Amazon Prime, make sure to check out Prime Gaming. If you don't have Amazon Prime, get on it for gaming alone, but also the awesome benefits that it provides outside of that. I might follow Goremiser's suit a little bit, might give some shout-outs to those Twitch Prime subs throughout this death segment and throughout this set as well. Thanks again to Prime Gaming for powering us here in Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League. My name is Dolson Trell. He's with me after our first set of the day. I don't know if you can, do you consider that an upset, Bolts over the Titans? I guess standings-wise it is.
Standings-wise, yes, but I think we both had the thought that it was definitely possible to go to that Game 3 standing, and I think whenever the Bolts show up, man, they look very solid. So not going to say an upset, but definitely an interesting match that they just had, and the Bolts come out on top. I mean, they look great.
In the way that the SPL just looks wild now if you look at the standings, and we'll see the standings in a second, and we'll get a second look at it, but let's first take a look at the schedule of the upcoming matchups that we've got here. 2-1 win for the Bolts over the Titans start off this weekend, and then a sneaky good set here between the Solar Scarabs and the Oni Warriors, followed by Valks Leviathans to start off our day tomorrow, and then Bolts and Scarabs will end our day tomorrow, and then a triple header, as always, of SPL games over on Sunday. Solar Scarabs and Oni Warriors, a team that last year were always battling with one another for that last spot in to the tournaments, that one final spot, top 6. It was always Oni Warriors versus Scarabs. But as the standings will show us here in just a moment, that's not so much been the case at the start of Season 9 so far, where the Oni Warriors firmly tied for 4th place right now with 3 other teams, technically 2 since the Kings have that extra loss. Solar Scarabs have just not gotten their feet underneath themselves yet here so far in Season 9. They've gotten the win over the Valhalla Valkyries. Just the wheels just haven't quite been turning for the Solar Scarabs team. And let's start there, Trelly. Let's start with the Solar Scarabs. A team that has gotten early game leads plenty of times, but a team that hasn't been able to capitalize on those early game leads.
Yeah, it seems like their identity is definitely that early pressure. They're able to find like 2, 3, sometimes 5K gold leads in the early portion of the game, playing off scream and inbound, finding lots of, ganks in the early potential, and they get these leads, but they just can't translate it into the late game team fights where they're able to get online. I mean, I remember this play specifically when I saw Scream on Thor, and I was like, he's able to hit the double tap even though the beads came through, such a sick gank, and then they end up just throwing the game after the fact. They can't hold on to these leads. They're not able to translate it into these late-game team fights. So small little adjustments could be made, and this Scarabs roster could be extremely nice. I mean, right now, sitting about 1-4, I believe, we just saw. So they've taken games off people. They've been able to look very solid, but just as the game continues, they're just not able to, really just cash in on what they're doing.
Yeah, mathematically not out of the top 6 just yet, but, looking like it's going to take a monumental turnaround here from this team. Again, it's so unique when you look at this roster. I think Stewart has really matured as a player. I think Baronic has started to have a really good year here in Season 9 as well. It's almost like team mistakes have just cost this team their games up to this point, because individually we've seen great performances from these players. So I do think, and I'll echo some of your thoughts there, Trelly, that this team feels like a couple in-game adaptations away from being a whole different look from what 1-4 looks like, and could start up against the Oni Warriors. But I do think a lot of it starts here. I think Baronic has really grown as a player. Still has some, not a newcomer, no longer a rookie, new-ish to the SPL moments. But I do think has now really become an asset to the Solar Scarabs team.
Yeah, it used to be they would just sort of play off of Scream, being able to carry and then get everyone ahead, that sort of thing. But Baronic has had some great performances in his own right, able to get ahead, get these kills, and show some dominance in that mid lane, as well as Stewart. Both have been able to show some leads, find some pressure in those lanes. It's just, again, can you translate as they are very relaxed right now?
The gang is chilling.
Oh, yeah, they're ready for this one, clearly. But just making sure that they're, on point, and get to these late game portions. I mean, if they just got a little bit of that Leviathan's blood in them, right, where they're like, hey, we're okay with getting to this 30-minute portion of the game where we're confident in our team fights, it just takes a little bit of correction and practice and comms. I think they'll be able to be a very solid team if they can get that down.
Look, the Maxnomic Smite chair, picture of comfort. Good enough for the Solar Scarabs. They are relaxed going into this matchup against the Oni Warriors. I'm not sure any team in the league should be relaxed facing the Oni Warriors right now, because a team that last year, let's be honest, Charlie, even that's at points throughout Season 9 here, would pop off and they would steal some games off top teams, but still just found themselves in that bottom half of the league all throughout the year last year. With a win here, tie themselves for first place in the league, granted with 4 other teams. But the Oni Warriors have shown us that really it is a consistency issue, because we have seen the top of the world when it comes to the Oni Warriors. They've beaten teams that otherwise were on top of the standings. The Oni Warriors had a 2-0 week last week. It's about finding that consistency, and I think this roster can do it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you guys have not been at home paying attention to the Oni Warriors, they have been able to take down the best of the Camelot Kings, the best of the Atlantis Leviathans, when they were at top of the roster, as you said. So going in, they had to look at these teams and be like, wow, you guys are on the top of the standings. We're sort of the underdogs in this matchup, and still able to find these wins. So they've been looking extremely solid. They've been playing some great Smite early on, and just, I don't know, they're able to find so much pressure, which is odd because, as you mentioned, last year they didn't have it in them, but it was more so because they weren't all here. Now they're here, they're in studio, and they are looking great as a 5-man squad.
Cuvo Fred, in my opinion, has really started to step up. So if I look at the Scarabs and how Stewart and Baronic have started to understand the SPL a little bit better and become a lot better players, I think Cuvo Fred, I mean, he's one world, so it's not like he needs to get used to the SPL. But Cuvo Fred didn't have the best year in Season 8. The Worlds run for the Warriors, a run was more of a walk or a jog, didn't get much of anywhere. I think that Cuvo Fred has really started to step up so far this year, over the last couple of performances especially. And with Jungle, how important as it is, Cuvo Fred playing better, of course, going to be important. So now the Oni Warriors have won 4 straight games, 2 straight sets, both of them 2-0. And so it's a 2-0 win over the Valhalla Valkyries, and then the 2-0 win over the Kings is really what made some waves. So what's it going to take for the Scarabs to get a win here today? What's it going to take for the Oni Warriors to get a win here today? Let's not listen to Trelly and I any further. We sat down with a member of the Scarabs and a member of the Oni Warriors to hear their thoughts.
Our team's performance so far, it's obviously been up and down. Obviously spending a year not being able really to grow that repertoire between each other is a little bit hard, so now we're kind of like figuring it all out.
Honestly, I think we've kind of underperformed. We've had a lot of struggles later in the game. I think we're not on the same page recently. I think our practice has kind of been lacking, and we're going to try and work on that.
We still need to work on a few different things. We aren't as cohesive as we should be. We aren't as communicative, I feel, at times when we should be, and that kind of causes us to be a little bit on different pages. There are obviously good accomplishments, like the way we've been playing against Levi's Kings. I think was really indicative of how we can play when we're all on and playing how we should, and taking what we're learning from scrims and from each week and putting it all together. So
probably just being on the same page as each other. I think our late game shot calling is okay, but we're never really on the same page, in my opinion.
I mean, we're decently confident against the Scarabs. They're obviously a good team. I think they've improved.
Yeah, I think the Oni Warriors are better than they were last season. Obviously, they had a really good set versus Levi's where they looked really dominant. But I kind of think they still have some of the issues that they had last year.
The big threat. I mean, Scream's always a dangerous one. He's a little bit of a wild card, as I'm sure everyone knows. I would say Scream's probably the most impactful that I've seen, which, I mean, as a jungler, it's kind of your job, so.
The biggest threat's got to be Nika. His God pool is really massive. You don't really know what he's playing week to week, and he could definitely come out and play some Smite.
I mean, there's some teams that, you know, you're going to struggle against, especially teams like us that are still learning. I think Scarabs are sort of doing that as well with a new solo laner in, good old Ronnie. So yeah, it'll be interesting, but I'm very confident.
Officially go on record as saying that I love Chuckles, the coach of the Oni Warriors. One of my favorite guys to have around the studio. A great Smite mind and an awesome personality. I'm glad we were able to grab him for that interview. I don't think any surprise, though, in the biggest threats that are shouted out on the team specifically here. The Oni Warriors feeling like Scream, the type of player who can take a game over, and the Scarabs feeling like Nika is the type of player who can take a game over, and I think both of those track pretty well.
Definitely, but the one thing I'm a little bit worried about is the fact that Chuckle said they're still learning. I mean, they've been looking super solid. Obviously, every coach is going to say that they have some things they have to work on, but to say that the Oni Warriors, who have been performing as they have, he knows what they have to work on, he knows what they're still working on, but he's still saying we're still learning, we're still trying to come into our squad as a five-man unit. We still have some things we need to improve on. That's scary, because what are they going to look like when they don't have anything to work on anymore? You know what I mean? This team has been looking super solid.
I think what's scary for the Scarabs as we move into picks and pans for game number 1 is that the Scarabs have now lost 6 straight games, 3 straight sets, potentially even extends beyond that, but specifically 6 straight individual games. It was a Leviathan's loss, Titans loss, and then I think won game 1 against the Kings and then dropped 2 and 3, and then beat the Valkyries in a set just prior to that. And so the Scarabs just, I don't know, you got to get some momentum going here. You know, at some point, the ball has got to roll in your direction. The momentum needs to swing back because you've been getting these early game leads and not closing them out. That's got to be the big change here for the Solar Scarabs. Let's catch back up, though, as I've kind of gone on a tangent here. Kleena gets banned, as well as the Ardio and the AMC.
Do
On the
not
flip side, though,
forget.
Cthulhu, Kabrak, and Daji all taken away, and that is going to leave the Yemoja open to inbound, something that last year I would be excited for the Oni Warriors about, if inbound getting Yemoja. Admittedly, I think he's turned it around. I think inbound looks a lot better on this pick nowadays and is a worthwhile addition to the Scarabs roster.
Yeah, it used to be a bit of a joke, the fact that Bobby's inbound, or his Yemoja was just not up to par, but I think as of recently, you're right to highlight the fact that it has been looking a lot better. ESET, though, is going to be the first pick for the Oni Warriors. I was going to touch on the fact that there's a few top picks open. Gilgamesh, Zeus come to mind. ESET is going to be the choice here, so that could be a mid lane. We could see it in the support role. There's a few different options, so we're going to have to keep our eye on the Oni Warriors draft, see where that might fall into place here, but now the Solar Scarabs have a choice back.
Charybdis.
Do you try to get some of this pressure? And Charybdis is finally locked in here, was not available until just this today, I believe. So finally, we're going to see what this character is able to do once again in that dual lane paired with the Yemoja.
Now, there are a couple of things I think that you have to be wary of. The Charybdis, traditionally for the Scarabs, actually has gone mid. So I think this is something that Baronic can absolutely play mid if they want to stick Stewart onto something else. And I think the Ola run is something else here for Stewart. Might end up being Ola run over in the dual lane, Charybdis for Baronic out of mid. And ESET, based on what we just saw from Ven, I don't think is out of the realm of possibility for Dardes to be playing, not to be a support pick for Neilma moving forward. I think those are a couple important things to look at. As a Camazotz ends up getting locked in here, Trelly.
Oh, yeah.
And so I would assume Guild Jungle, and I might put Camazotz in Nika's hands.
Oh, yeah. And when I think of Nika, Camazotz is one of the picks that comes to the forefront. He's able to hard carry on this character. He plays it a lot in ranked, and he also likes playing it in the SPL. We've seen those big plays he can make with the hybrid builds, even more damage-oriented, so it's going to be quite annoying. I honestly haven't seen Charybdis in so long. I forgot about the flex potential. That Stewart loves playing these magical ADCs, and Baronic has no problem going with these hunters. Obviously, his AMC was banned away, so Charybdis is going to be a solid option there. They are going to ban away the Chiron, trying to get rid of some of that range that is still available in that duo lane, so not quite sure. Chiron can go in the mid lane as well. We still have to see. Once we see this next pick, I think that might help us figure out if this is a support ESET or mid lane. We just had Dardes in studio for Content Day, and he was telling me about how he thinks it's a solid mid lane pick as well, and that's not going to do anything for me.
Still, I think goes into that God pool, though, for Dardes that you know, the more eclectic style picks is what worked for the Oni Warriors last year, but Dardez has found some momentum going into this year into some of the more standard meta style picks as well. Jing Wei, where does this come from? Is it just to shine a light on this? Actually, this is surprising to me. If I'm looking back at Dardez's last 6 games, he's played ESET in 3 of the last 6 games, so it has just been strong for Dardez, and that actually surprises me. I didn't realize it was quite that hefty of a pick rate for Dardez on this pick. But let's talk about Jing Wei for a second, Trelly. Out of nowhere, and suddenly it took over our first set of the day, and now trickles in for vote here in our second set of the day.
Yeah, the safety and the Dev Gauntlets build must be taking their scrims by storm, because obviously we can only see the facts. We can only see that Jing Wei has been very prioritized between the Bolts and the Titans, and now just wanting to make sure that vote is on this safe pick. That looks like the Death Toll Crusher build is just not going to be the option right now. People want to be safe. They want to make sure they can get their crit online with that Gilded Arrow start, and Jing Wei abuses it more than anyone right now. So much safety in that lane and just get the gold and farm up. So that seems to be the option, at least right now, for the Oni Warriors. And the Solar Scarabs can probably still go that route with the Gilded Arrow just because Oleron uses it so well. They have a few more picks here, usually saving Screams for the last, so this will make sense. They just have to really think about, do they want some early pressure? Right now, Oleron, not the best in the early game. Stuart really pulled me aside after I said that and said, hey, stop saying Oleron's bad in the early game. And I'm like, if you do something great on Oleron in the early, I'll stop saying that. But as of right now, we haven't seen Oleron get active in the early game.
Yep, hasn't been proven otherwise just yet. Thanatos would be interesting. So would Osiris. Osiris in the games that we've seen this pick have felt very jungly, and it won't be in Osiris in the solo lane. It'll be King Arthur, and it will be an Osiris out of the jungle for the Solar Scarabs. Jungle Osiris, Trelly, are you still buying that stock? Are you still expecting that pick to rise up a little bit here? Do you think we've seen the best of Warriors in the jungle and you're not sold yet?
Osiris jungle is definitely solid. I mean, it has that early pressure that you want, but in my mind, the Solar Scarabs have never had the issue finding that early pressure. It's that late game pressure, that 5v5 team fight that they really need. Right now, though, they have a few different tools that can help them get to that point. Obviously, River's Rebuke, a very solid 5v5 team fight ultimate, as well as the fact that Oleron with the Sanctified Fields, arguably one of the best 5v5 team fight ults in the game. So I think they have a good balance here of trying to get this double ADC comp to late game as well as early pressure with the double warrior draft. So they are trying to match some of that because Gilgamesh is going to bring that in spades. Camazotz is probably just going to sit in lane, sustain up, and going to be very annoying to deal with. So I think trying to match some of what the Oni Warriors have drafted makes a lot of sense, as well as taking away that Fafnir. Fafnir is going to boost up a lot of these auto attackers in the Gilgamesh, the Jing Wei. Heck, even Camazotz can get some buffs from that. So a great amount of objective pressure the Oni Warriors are going to lock in.
Fafnir is a strong pick for Neilma as well, and that is if there was any doubt, now it does confirm that it's Dardez on E-set out of mid, as it has been 3 of the last 6 games. Fafnir was the last pick that we saw for Neilma, and that was a 1-0-13 win over the Camelot Kings. I'm nervous, admittedly. Look, Nika, Scarab, Scream specifically talked about Nika being the threat on the Oni Warriors to look out for. And Camazotz, just depending on how this build looks, is that hyper carry style of solo laner, depending on how Nika ends up building this Camazotz out. I think the right side of the map, the solo lane side of the map, depending on which way you're looking at it, is an absolute threat here for the Oni Warriors. But I think King Arthur is a unique pick we've seen a little bit more of over the last couple of weeks. If Scary D can turn back time a little bit here, get one of those vintage Scary D performances going, I think King Arthur also has the potential, Trelly, to really make a big impact.
Yeah, I would say the option is definitely there, but looking, I think Camazotz is just a really solid pick into this Oleron specifically. You can kind of just go up into that Bat Out of Hell, ignore the Sanctified Fields, and Oleron has to just eat the full brunt of that damage. Yeah. So any sort of CC immune character that can just ignore that ultimate is going to be hard to deal with. Right now, though, most of the characters in the Oni Warriors, they can't do that. There isn't too much CC immunity there. I think right now, if Neomod does go into the Dragon form and then get stuck in that Sanctified Fields, it'll be very hard to get out because Beads right now is not ran on too many supports. There's just too many options that you want, especially with the Fafnir, usually the bracers and the upgrades that are going to make you shred these objectives quicker. That's what you're going to be prioritizing.
Where do you think Jungle start to put their pressure here as well? Because we saw a lot of mid lane pressure in our last set. E set, maybe can get run out here, but Charybdis so safe, right? Especially when level 5 gets reached. If you're Cuvo Fred, rather, Are we just ignoring mid lane? We realize it's going to be difficult to kill off this Charybdis, or you think there might be some value there in finding some ganks?
I will say, if you have that E set in mid lane with you, you have a lot of lockdown. There's a lot of CC. I mean, we just saw in that set prior, there's a lot of the silence into the Spirit Ball into a drop kick. You can't even get into that Charybdis dash to be immune if you're getting CC chained out of it. So I feel like there is still some kill potential in mid, despite the fact that Charybdis can be so safe. But I feel like camping solo lane, getting Nika ahead has to be the name of the game. I mean, on this Camazotz, he's hard carried so many games before. Why not let him try it again?
Can the Oni Warriors continue their momentum? Can the Solar Scarabs build some momentum? Let's find our answer in game number 1.
Yeah, I think that's the ultimate question we need to find out here, and we might get to find it out very quickly as an invade up to the blue buff to try and get some damage onto Nika. But that Invader's Curse already starting to pay off here, at least for Nika's safety and for Nika's sake here, as all the Scarabs will now back their way out of here. By the way, it's J-Mac and Score here, joining me here for our game against the Solar Scarabs and the Oni Warriors, our second set of the day here in our final week of the SPL Phase 1. And both these teams, especially the Oni Warriors right now, Gore, they're really trying to keep that top 4 spot.
Yeah, honestly, they're the ones I think who have had a wildly successful run over the last few weeks. Again, week 2, maybe they'd like to forget about some of those games, right? They didn't quite go the way I think they wanted them to, and took them longer to confirm some of the wins I think they would otherwise want. But taking wins over teams like the Leviathans, teams like the Kings, that's a big deal to them. I will say, though, some of the best Scarabs gameplay and most successful Scarabs gameplay we have seen lately has been with Stewart on the Oleron, Baronic on the Charybdis, Inbound on the Emoja. Like, this 3-piece is really good for the Scarabs, so I'm really excited to watch how mid lane works out. First off, like, getting Charybdis back after so long as well. It feels good to just be able to see her again. And I think that Baronic, I mean, he is just absolutely insane on this pick, and we've already been talking about him a lot more in the last couple of weeks in terms of what the mid laner for the Scarabs has been bringing to the team. Much higher impact than we got to see throughout some of the games last year. It makes me more excited to see what could happen around mid lane.
And it feels like this composition, I was sent into the green room as these picks were coming in for the Scarabs, but this really feels like they're going back to what was working and winning the games, even all the way back towards the tail end of Season 8. Yeah. I mean, Stewart on these magical ADCs is where he was really starting to pop up between the Oleruns, the Freyas of the world. Probably a little bit less so Freya nowadays, but still this Olerun seems to be one of those magical ADCs that have continued to remain here. Baronic going back to the Charybdis, which was a signature pick from him all the way back in Season 8 as well. I really like what the Scarabs have drafted together with this composition. It really just feels like a Scarabs draft through and through.
And that's a good thing to have, right? Finally figuring out something that is a little bit more of your identity. Didn't play on the Scarabs, but you can see pretty easily right there, Scary D back on King Arthur. Last year, very prominent in the solo lane. Granted, Scary D was in the jungle
That's a scary
the majority
king.
of that. Season 7, Scary D made this pick look really good either way. So again, I think every lane matchup has something spicy to watch over, because the Scarabs have something that, whether it's comfort or past success, something to write home about. And the Warriors have just been playing insanely well, and the desk had highlighted it well, what this draft can bring, as well as the kind of control that it can bring to a table. A lot of CC, a lot of good, capabilities as a unit for like team auto attackers. And so where they get aggressive might be a big deal.
Good lord, the Scarabs are getting aggressive on all fronts here. An invade up by the speed, and now one here by the red buff, but Baronic might be caught out here by Neil. A stun is good. Cuvo's rotated back over. The slow from the Scimitar is good, but as soon as Baronic gets out of there, it's a Spirit Ball awaiting him on the tail end. The speeds will get him out for a little while longer. Cuvo needs that drop kick to come back up. He'll have it, kicking Baronic up against the wall, but the damage needs to go through. Cuvo Fred finally strikes first blood, and maybe a second on an inbound. He is down to a sliver of health, and Neil will jump over the wall to grab him.
I mean, that's just a good turnaround. One thing Charybdis has, usually at level 5 we talk about it, but I think even at level 3 it's worth mentioning, is a lot of survivability. And you see that. Baronic, any other mid laner, doesn't make it anywhere near that distance away. Although Scream might be in a little bit of trouble. I don't know if they want to commit to the kill, since they got the red buff here. So the Warriors already off to a good start, but any other mid laner dies pretty much up right by the red buff. Like, they don't really get that far away from where the engage starts for the Warriors. So I think it's a good play for them to get away, but unfortunately it's just great from the Warriors to continue that aggression.
Stewart needs a little bit more damage. He's chasing so far. Neil has found him, and Cuvo is back on the way, but Cuvo very low on mana. Stewart might be able to make it out of here just on the merit alone that there's no follow-up here for the Oni Warriors. An inbound walking back in will definitely make sure that that one can go their way here. But taking a look back at First Blood, I mean, we're going to see the safety of the crib, just how far they're able to get. Cubo even getting knocked back down. But we do see that horrific emblem come out here on this squad. That's why the beads had to be expended as a little bit of a bonus there as far as Bronx is concerned. But Cubo Fred on this Gilgamesh, man, I mean, this god just has not fallen out of favor just yet. Still so much potency with that drop kick.
I think that highlighted what Trelly mentioned on the desk better than anything, like any vivid imagination could do, which is just, by the way, CC between Dardes and Cuvo and the damage that's going to come with it, it's gonna be a lot. There's a lot of control between the mid and jungle pick, and there's a lot of damage alongside those stuns, silences, whatever you want to, look at for them. And so I think that getting caught out, Boronic, between your Whirlpool form and your ult, you're gonna have like 9 seconds, essentially, of CC immunity. 3 of those are also damage immunity. But that is a heavy commitment to just try and get away for something that's gonna be really short cooldowns on the other side. So Dardes and Cubo should be able to apply some pressure to Boronic. I think he's on a good pick to try and dodge out a lot of that damage and keep himself safe.
Ooh, Nika has to use the bat out of hell. Has to get away because the tether was still on him. Should he have landed there? Cubo shows back up. Drop kick will stun out Scary D. And some good damage from the Vampire bats out of Nika will make sure that Scary D does get poked down pretty heavily. But a Bluestone into a Sovereignty, a lot of extra HP 5 for Scary D as he continues to stack up his passive, work himself towards that 80 charge ultimate as well. I mean, it's hard to kill a King Arthur, especially when you're running 2 physicals into a physical defense item.
Yeah, I mean, Sovereignty super early on, it is not, like, in lane, this is not a common solo lane pickup. Like, I mean, if you look at any supports, I think at the beginning of the year, there was a lot of Sov rushes, things like that. But because, just like you said, at this point, think of who you're going up against. All right, Cubo and Nika are going to show up to lane a ton. Both of them are going to do physical damage. And you might see Neil, maybe Dardes, make some rotations so you don't have prots against them, but neither would most other physical protection items that you're trying to go first, at the very least. And this really does benefit because where's King Arthur going to be in the brunt of the fight? Who's he going to be helping? Scream, inbound, to an extent Boronic and Stewart, depending on where he's standing in later rotations. So you still get a Sovereignty, you still get a really good passive, and you get something that helps you survive a lot early on. And so it just feels like it's going to be something that maybe is a little atypical, but fits perfectly.
You guys are all over the place. Fights happening everywhere, especially around this mid. An ult from Boronic will whiff because of the leap there from Cuvo Fred. But at the very least, the Obelisk does get stacked up for the Scarabs. That was their main prize, at least for that little bit of a skirmish there, inbound. And Boronic able to secure those last couple of mid-heartbeat camps to get that. And you can see with the help of that Obelisk, with the help of Scary D being able to pick up these totems, they've been able to net themselves at least even, if not slightly ahead now of the Oni Warriors in gold.
And honestly, that's something that I want to talk about more and more because the Scarabs lately, their early game has just been so good. Now, I can't think of, well, now with Scary D up against the wall, we'll maybe have to hold that thought. He's getting jumped on.
He's got a little bit of backup here with Scream, but Scream's not going to be able to stop a bat out of hell from Nika. Maybe he can at least slow the bat down. The tether is enough of a threat to allow Scary D to find a way out of here. Scream showing up just in the nick of time to save his solo laner. But look at this interesting build that Scream has started with here. Golden Blade as a first item after his Eye of the Jungle. That is a fairly uncommon item in general, let alone to see coming out of the jungle.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to help out a lot of clear. I will admit, Osiris isn't who I think of a lot when you need that. You get good attack speed, though, which is more of the stat that you're probably going to be leaning on, as well as some move speed. Again, it's not a bad item. It is definitely new for what we're used to seeing. And Osiris already has 2 cleave autos in the path. So if you're thinking about it, like, this is going to be maybe one of the fastest camp clearers that you could probably see just in general.
Here we go. We're gonna watch it.
And I think that's, I mean, it's fun, and we'll get to see how much it does truly benefit him. I guess throughout the entire duration of this. I think it's going to be fun to watch how this build continues going because this is definitely different than the Osiris that we've gotten to see up to this point when we've seen him play this year, as well as a lot last year.
Inbound though, out of Omi at this point, only has enough, has the ultimate ready to go. The interaction with that wall means inbound's just going to bounce around a little bit here. Cubo Fred down to half health, Scream into the backline with the Lord of the Afterlife, and Scream will finally come up and find something here for the Solar Scarabs off the initiation. that the only Warriors that started up here, Scarabs now finally on the board.
And honestly, this is not a spot that I think you want them to be in. Being able to find kills, being able to get aggressive, look for invades. They've been really good at getting a hefty lead. I think it was last week they got up to like 3,000. Unfortunately for them, they still lost that game. That's always been the problem, right? Is not just getting these leads. Maintaining them and actually turning them into the wins so far for the Scarabs has been where they faltered. And realistically, when you're talking about teams that is not who you want to have that risk against, the Warriors were down by 12,000 gold and were able to still be the Kings. So you need to have some clean play, I think, from the Scarabs for the duration of this game to make sure what is like this 1,000 gold lead that can actually manifest into something bigger. You know, you can grow it and you can make it a little more lasting and actually turn it into a win and find some success for your team.
I was watching that purple buff invade by Scream. He throws out his little flail, second ability on the Osiris, hits the camp, and it lives with 6 HP as he walks out of the range of it. I guess maybe he thought he had just enough damage to clear that out, but it lived with 6 health, and Neil was able to grab that one, save it for his carry here. And speaking of people going interesting items to start this game out, we got the Golden Blade. We talked about that.
Yep.
Let's talk about Baronic here heading towards a Toxic Blade as a second item.
Yeah, so not common.
No.
Not common this early on either. And it's definitely something that's fun. Again, a lot of attack speed, good movement speed. Mainly the passive, at least is what you tend to think of, does deal with healing. I think of Camazotz. Camazotz is very sustainable. You look at Circle Protection, you look at the fact that there's a Devo's Gauntlets, right, getting picked up by this Jingwei. So there's a lot of healing sources on the other side. And right now, Baronic is screaming, let's stop that as fast as possible. I mean, you've got a Brawlers into a Toxic Blade. Immediately, you're looking at trying to control those picks and keep the Warriors from being able to find that much sustain. And in team fights, it's going to be pretty easy to apply, right? I mean, your Charybdis, you've got a ton of autos that you're going to throw out and weave, so the Toxic Blade won't be too difficult. Maybe the hardest part is getting the right target that you're looking for. The Brawlers is going to be easy, though. I think on top of it, like, both of these items are going to be something Baronic will apply readily. We'll just have to see if it affects the Warriors as much as it can, right? Is this healing really bad enough that you need to go into both of those items, or is that actually going to slow down how much damage you can actually do?
Yeah, it kind of feels weird thinking of Charybdis as a quote-unquote kind of utility anti-healer for this team right now here into the mid lane. Neil and Dardas will step forward to meet up against Baronic and Inbound. Same levels across the board for these guys here. A 1-level lead for Scary D over in the solo lane. And talk about Stewart over here, level 13 versus level 12 on Vote. Almost got a solo kill right as Stewart hit that level 5 mark. Just needed like 1, maybe 2 more auto attacks to have gotten that kill. So maybe the Scarabs can find one on Neil Moss, surrounded by 3, holding on to that transformation until he needs to use it here. As soon as he lands down, though, the stun just a little mistimed. Charybdis ult goes through, does stun Neil Ma. The circle of protection way into the back line. Scream and a good Riptide out of Inbound will at least keep them in the fight, but with Cuba Frank coming back over, Scream is now the one who has to go on the run, but Scary D teleports into the fight, slams down one right into the clutches of Stewart, who will find a knockback onto Nika and force Vote out of this fight, but Nika can't get out because there's a King Arthur body blocking the way.
I mean, just good CCG, and that's a great fight from the Scarabs. Dardas makes it out. Dardas loses beads, right? Circle of Protection, it's gone. A lot of the big team fight utilities of the people that live there for the Warriors is stripped away because the Scarabs play that incredibly well. And just what a good rotation. I mean, Scary D being able to get there just in time to really set up the first 2 of those kills and then confirm Nika with the body blocks, as well as open up the conversation. Scream goes a little deep, and you can see, has been low health bar since the fight, but is able to get a little bit more done. Stewart and Baronic have a lot of damage between the 2 of them, and that's just a really clean rotation for them. A great engagement from the Scarabs, and more things like that I honestly think come up more often as the game goes on. I think King Arthur's going to be involved in a lot more fights, so Cyrus is going to hit just as hard, and now that he has a 2-level lead, he's going to do wonderful things in terms of what the Scarabs are expecting out of their jungle. And then you've got 2 carries that, as the game goes on, Stewart, guess what? He's just going to hit harder. Same thing for Baronic. And Inbound has been playing this, a really beautiful Riptide, really good walls from the ult. I think that they just showcased right there what this 5-on-5 can look like, and as long as they can keep that pace up, they're going to be able to continue furthering this lead.
And I think, as much as we kind of talk about, Inbound's performance on this god last season, I think that's no longer a relevant topic out here. Sort of towards the tail end, Phase 3 really starts stepping up with this god. Worlds qualifiers, even World Stage. Went so far as the teams now having to ban this god away from him. So Inbound has really been able to step up here. These Riptides have been on point there. So much, in fact, that last little one that actually had stopped Nika, I thought that was a Riptide. I thought that somehow Inbound found another one, and then I turned around and it's actually just Scary D using that uppercut in order to push him back in. But Inbound, very clean so far on this Umoja. One little death to his name, but that's not a huge deal. Maybe they can find Vote here, who used that agility to get himself back in. Stun is through, the orbs fall down from that divine overflow, or overflowing divinity. That was the name of it. That was the ability. I remember on our battle sounds with the Warriors, we were like, no shot, that's actually an ability name. But yes, that second ability there on
What did Neil
Overrun.
call it? Fire hands?
Fire hands, that's right. That's right, I forgot we coined that one as the fire hands.
And we'll see. I guess, I can hear their comms now. Scary D, though, gets drop kicked back.
He will have the spin to get a little bit of distance here. Has that second spin. A jump in by Cuvo Fred, but a stun by Scary D. And a lot of damage fired right back. Cuvo Fred, not quite as tanky as he would hope to be. Even Baronic getting aggressive up against Dardes. Inbound has the walls. Will drop them right on top of Dardes, but there is a circle of protection waiting on the tail end of the fight. Dardes will be healed back to near full. But a couple of big ultimates burned throughout both of those engagements.
Yeah, a lot. I mean, the biggest cooldown is going to be the 140 seconds for the Rivers Rebuke, right? Inbound's going to go a lot longer without their ult versus what you're going to see out of Dardes, Nika, Vote even, as they start to get all their ults back. But I do think, where the Scarabs are getting aggressive, that's good signs, right? Try to continue this lead, showcase that you're still willing to fight. If Scary D either had A, a little more mana, or B, just someone walking over towards lane, that might turn into 1 to 2 kills, right? At least one person dies over there. Unfortunately, they don't get to live in that world. He just lives, which is a huge deal for him, to, because of the investment trying to chase him down. It's more that that ult from Inbound that catches me off guard. Does get circle of protection, does force things to feel a little more awkward in mid for the Warriors, but it didn't feel like Baronic wanted to commit heavily to that fight. And so it was a little maybe misconception or maybe a misstep between the two of them. Doesn't result in any kills. Again, one ult that gets dropped on the side of the Warriors just to kind of quell it. So we'll keep our eyes on that. Phantom Shells are going to be very important, though, because with the way that Inbound continues to hit these walls, you're going to have to start walking through them eventually.
A little bit of a fight over here for the Greater Scorpion, the Scarabs. One of the other teams in the league who are really going for these Scorpion grabs, making sure they get their Obelisk control out here alongside the Kings. Pyromancer will be the objective call for the Scarabs and will be the secured objective. And the Solar Scarabs, 7,000. Where in the world did this near 7,000 gold lead come from? I mean, we were talking about them earlier, sitting at like 1,500, maybe 2K, kind of bouncing, but this lead is ballooned out of control here. Solar Scarabs are really commanding this early game.
Yeah, a lot of it's off that fight that we saw around the red buff, right? They get a lot of kills up against them. 3 versus the Warriors, forced Dardes back, and Voted used pretty much every utility available at the time. So they weren't going to be able to fight, and that made it for an easy Gold Fury for the Scarabs that is then converted into invades, right? Little small things. And you had mentioned it earlier, but like going for the Scorpion, stripping that away, being able to walk up to a red buff, much like we just saw, and take that away. It's these little moments that are getting a lot of farm for the Scarabs, and they add up over time to the point where, it's, again, this is a very comfortable lead. You can choose fights, you can make things happen, and the game is going to go in your favor.
Dardes stuck inside the River's Rebuke, does have circle protection, but Baronic is going to use his ability to get himself out of danger here, but look at how basically no health Dardes got back from that. Yeah. That's the power of that Baronic has on this Charybdis. One ability and a couple of autos, and the fact that that last one is a chain of 3 means that Baronic can really stack up that Toxic Blade quickly here. I want to kind of echo what the desk was talking about as far as the Hunter-specific builds, and I'm talking physical Hunter builds. Maybe we'll have to talk about that in a moment as this Primal Fury is started up, but immediately leashed away. With the nerf to Crusher that we did see in this 9.4 patch, maybe seems to be a little bit less incentivizing for them. Now only grants, I think, is 10% attack speed versus what it was in its former glory of all the way up to upwards towards 20%. So we are seeing a kind of a shift in these builds here, just like a shift in Scream's position from that drop kick. But that's going to be it for him. Scream is still going to continue walking forward. Meanwhile, Scary D has found Vote, but Vote's got the agility. A nice Riptide by Inbound. It's going to force an airstrike out of the Hunter.
And then the leap disengage from Neil. I don't think the Warriors want a lot of this fight. The Scarabs want them to, Because if you take the bait, that means it's going to be a Primal Fury. They can further this lead even more. But going back to that Toxic Blade, and specifically what you had said with the Crusher nerf, now you're in a position where, I mean, we're seeing that. We're seeing Golden Blade. Like, the Scarabs are just looking for that attack speed on other items, and it's benefiting them a lot.
They're getting a lot of damage to Cuvo Fred. A leap over the wall by Scream forces a drop kick out of the jungler. Cuvo Fred will walk away. Scary D about half HP, but so is Neil Ma, who walked forward. The hamstring is good. Overhead slash, and Scary D will knock him up into the air for Stewart to knock him right back down. Scary D in the backline finds Dardes with the ultimate, and we'll get the beads out of the mid laner, but now Nika has separated himself from the fight. Ultimate from Baronic. Not going to find a whole lot of value in the team fight. Maybe at least get some damage on this Primal Fury.
Yeah, it should be able to clean this one
Wow,
up,
it's
no
gone.
problem. Yeah, I think that the Warriors, not necessarily, I want to say don't want to contend that one, but as much as they just can't, right? I mean, the fights haven't been going their way, and you don't have all the utility. With beads down on Dardes, yeah, you've got Circle of Protection, but you still got to get close to try and drop something like that and secure an objective away from the Scarabs. I think that the pressure and the presence that the Scarabs are exerting on the map right now is just immense. And I love how they're playing this. I mean, this is clean Scarabs gameplay. And they're getting to the point where we're starting to see, I want to say like a theme, which a lot of it has been, let's pressure Dardes, get Circle of Protection to get popped, does not have Aegis. And so as long as we can make sure that ult goes down, we can start fighting around these objectives. Because this is what we got. We got Sanctified Fields and Rivers Rebuke. We got two of the biggest rectangles in the game to just stop you from wanting to fight us. And I think that is great for the Scarabs because of how they're utilizing these. Granted, right now, for a couple of minutes, unless they want to go for a Fire Giant, probably not going to see a crazy large fight from them. Maybe they can force a kill to create an opportunity for the Fire Giant. But this is where things get into a lull. And when you have a lead, this is where things can get a little more awkward. A couple of wave pushes. There's no like jungles to invade. No camps that are really respawned right now outside of green. And I don't think you're gonna risk your life going that deep for green 20 minutes in. And so you're kind of just waiting. Let's see what the Pyromancer can bring. See if we can get something to happen in the jungle. Maybe look for a pick. And if none of that's gonna happen, let's feint a Fire Giant and force it.
Fire started up here by the Scarabs. Only 4 of the Warriors nearby. Vote on the way thanks to the help of that passive. But Neil Ma is already getting chunked down. One good Riptide will force out the Dragon, but he's going to be dropped into a Sanctified Field, and Stewart is ready to take him down. A killing spree for the Hunter of the Solar Scarabs. Now forces a legitimate 4v5 as one is already gone from the Warriors, and maybe another one after Rivers Rebuke will catch out Dardes. It's going to be the King Arthur ultimate out of Scary D to drop into the sky, but Dardes will heal back up to full. Cubo Fred trying to stop this fight, but Dardes just doesn't have the HP to live through all of this damage coming from Scary D, who will pick up the kill. Baronic will come in and grab Cubo Fred, and there's only 2 Warriors left.
And Nika does not look like he wants to be part of this fight. Does cancel the back. Vote still hanging around. I don't know. I mean, you've got Bat out of hell. Do you go for this? I think this is going to be risky, even with your ultimate. But Nika's healing up. Nika's tanky enough. This is going to be something that the Scarabs have to pay attention to. Look how much damage he's getting onto Baronic.
Baronic doesn't have lifesteal to fight back in this. Stewart has a little bit, but the Bat out of hell used by Nika. As soon as he lands down, he has to use the blink to get themselves on out. Some good healing coming out
huge.
of this Ola run. The healing coming from Umoja, keeping the team topped up around this Pyromancer, which will go the way of the Solar Scarabs. And with that, we bump themselves up to a near 9,000 gold lead at this point in the game. 12K experience, and a lot of that still very relevant experience. Not everybody has hit these level 20 points yet. It's mostly just gonna, actually, it's only gonna be the Hunter so far.
Yeah, you've got 3 levels, just now ticked down to 2 levels in mid, 3 levels in the jungle, 2 levels there for your solo laners. So it's a hefty experience lead to try and climb up for the Warriors, but this is one of those moments. It's very similar, I think, to last week in the Kings, right? They're down by a ton of gold, but that's a fight. If you lose 3 people next to a Fire Giant, that Fire Giant should go to the other team. Like, this should be, we're talking about the Scarabs knocking down tier 2s right now. That's where we should be. And the fact that just the Camazot's presence was enough to be able to turn that around is actually massive for the Warriors, keeping them in this game. Kills don't look that great, gold doesn't look that great, but the fact that their late game presence still exists despite the experience deficit and the gold deficit, I think goes to show, A, little bit of respect from the Scarabs, recognizing that that is not an easy objective to burn down, but B, the points that the Warriors are going to be able to pressure to make sure that the Scarabs aren't going to walk away with this as clean as this league should be making it.
Scream finds 2 in the mid lane, has Baronic as backup to fight, but now we have a full grouping of both teams around this tier 1 tower. Stewart does get hit by that spirit ball, but he'll be able to heal some of that back up. Neil jumps on out of here, and Scream will jump right back in over towards Votus. Had to use that agility to get out, but the Rivers Rebuke have now cut off the escape path for the Oni Warriors. A Sanctified Field out of Stewart will slow everything down. It's 2 gone from the Oni Warriors, and all that Nika and Cubo Fred can do right now is watch from the sidelines as the Scarabs continue their onslaught down mid.
Look, the last fight they had in this fight and the fight before that, and you know what, the fight before that, the Scarabs are playing so cleanly. I mean, everything just looks so good.
Cubo finds a drop kick on 2, but has to jump himself right back out. A Riptide will catch out Cubo. He doesn't have the leap to get back up. Scary D will take him out with the ultimate foe. Stunned in the back line by Baronic. In the mid lane, Phoenix goes down. Solar Scarabs have taken full control of this game with a 12,000 gold lead to kick things off here in game number 1. And Gore, they can make their way right over to that Fire Giant.
I mean, and we're talking standings shaking potential right now, right? Scarabs are looking amazing, and being able to win this set does so much for them in the grand scheme of the league, in the grand scheme of the phase here in the last week of phase 1. And just look at this damage. I mean, they're playing so clean.
Baronic does need a little bit of help from the team to make sure that this bat stays away. Riptide just off the mark by inbound this time around, but Nika is slowed down. He cannot find a path out. A jump out means a jump for Scream to go right back in, and Scary D to shut him down. The Solar Scarabs, every single time these Warriors are walking in, the Scarabs are finding pick after pick.
And here's the problem. What do you try to isolate right now? The King Arthur is ruining your lives. Scary D is playing this cleanly. Inbound, the walls are just too perfect. And that River's Rebuke is going to be coming up soon. That is going to create a lot of opportunity for them alongside the Sanctified Fields. But they still got to be careful here.
That and the Sanctified Field now back online for Stewart. He'll charge up that orb, fire it out, but not find anything. Vote on the run while Neil and Dardes run through the tier 2 tower. There's no chance they want to stick around to keep this fight up here, not with 5 of the Scarabs, but hey, Stewart, you guys forgot there's a tier 1 tower all the way back by. Just the heat of the moment situation. You're like, all right, guys, keep going, keep rushing. Why does the tower say immune?
You got that moment of clarity when it's like, oh, right, we do need to take that down.
Come on, Scary, win your lane.
Just impressive, though, from them, right? Like, even with a little moment like that, the just presence of the Scarabs in these fights has been incredible. Warriors are going to be able to get the Fury here. So that's at least something that you can strip away, right? That's going to give them a little bit of pressure. But you lost the Phoenix if you're the Warriors before the Fire Giant. So mid lane already has a distinct advantage. It gives the Scarabs a ton of wiggle room to play with over on left and over on right. These fights are going so heavily in their favor. A lot of the relics that they've had to use are coming back up off cooldown, namely beads there for Baronic. So it's making it a lot easier. And, you know, we're seeing just, I want to say outright bullying. Vote hasn't really been able to get in this fight. The Jingwei is forced to just retreat. Has been able to get out alive, but hasn't been able to apply anywhere near as much damage. Well, I guess the damage-wise is there. The kills just aren't happening for him. So maybe finding a little bit. But realistically, you're also having to go up against a double hunter, right? You've got Stewart and Baronic here are going to burn through a lot of these objectives, towers, phoenixes. And so you can't give up any of that room. And if you're getting what is apparently 17,000 damage out of Vote, you got to find a little bit more. Cubo Fred is just barely hanging out above where we see the supports. And that CC chain that was really good for the Warriors to get those first 2 kills hasn't been showing up a whole ton since then.
And this is the level of command that the Scarabs have right now, is that Scary D and Scream are walking through the base to get to the left side Phoenix here. But Baronic, because of that, has eaten a lot of pokes. Scary D about a quarter of his health while walking through. Inbound, soaking up the Titan. Neilma used the Dragon transformation, but he lands not quite into his death. The slight mistime by Baronic on that ultimate will not find it, but the left side Phoenix goes down. The River's Rebuke will catch all 5 in. Scream into the backlines, gonna help find 1. Inbound, credit to the kill, but now Cubo Fred stuck in the midst of 3. A couple rooted out. Vote will finally turn this fight around and get 1 for himself. Baronic taking down Cubo Fred. Dardes, Spirit Ball, double kill comes out of him, and now it's only 2 versus 2 left. Dardes on the run back from the base. Vote has separated themselves out of here. But I'm not sure that Inbound and Baronic can end this game. The Phoenix coming back up should be their final call.
Baronic has a lot of health, but not a lot of, well, actually does have a lot of damage. Can't even say that part. Not enough to walk into the Titan room, I guess, is more of the point I want to make. Does get the Phoenix. with Vote backing and being able to re-engage, that could have, if it had happened just a smidge sooner, resulted into a kill onto inbound. But that's unfortunately a great repel for the Warriors. The reason I say unfortunately is that because while it's so great, you still lose both of the Phoenixes that came up. You stop from losing the game, though, and that's exactly where it comes from. I think a lot of that is just damage from the backline. Good CC and good control onto Scary D that slows down this King Arthur, who has just been an absolute menace. You had mentioned it, but mistiming that allow Neil to get out of there forces them to focus Neil a lot further in the base as opposed to being able to swap targets like they would have otherwise. Dardes has a lot of phenomenal damage. It's this Spirit Ball that ends up killing off Stewart that just looks beautiful to me. And, you know, I was calling it out there. It was 17,000 before that fight, so 5,000 damage that gets dealt by Vote during that duration. It is wild to get that amount of number in one fight. Great for them. And finally, I get to see where it's getting applied, right? Like, 17,000 up to that point, it was a very silent 17K. And that last 5 that he puts up is loud enough for the Warriors to start screaming from the rooftops. Not enough to turn the game around, but it does keep them at least alive.
And I think we kind of see the second side of the coin from Dardes' ultimate there. Everybody talks about the amount of healing that Circle of Protection does. Also, the amount of objective secure that it has out there. One of the best securing ultimates in the game. It doesn't just apply to objectives. That ultimate still hits players just as hard there. And you see him drop that out right in front of all of the carries, leaves it right on top of his tanks at that point. And it kind of separated the Solar Scarabs during that fight. You saw Scream had to go real deep to try and connect a kill out there. Scary D gets pushed away from everybody else. But now the Solar Scarabs have had a little bit of their stumble towards the left side. That Fire Giant buff has worn off. It's right back to fighting as this Fire Giant's about to come back up. But the dunk in from Scream will take Vote off the map. 60 seconds until the carry is back up for the Warriors. And the Scarabs are setting themselves up, at least for this Tier 2 tower. Full minion wave there means they'll be able to grab that gold for free.
And you've got 2 fire waves that are pushing down, admittedly getting countered out right now by a lot of the Warriors, but the Presence, because they saw them on the map, they're going to go for the Phoenix.
It's going to be right side Phoenix going down easily to the Scarabs. Don't even need much more than a couple of minions. All it takes is that one to step in for Stu and Baronic to absolutely shred through it like paper. And now the Scarabs can set their sights towards Fire Giant. Still 20 more seconds until Vote is back up. And the Scarabs have already set themselves in a position for fire. And they are melting this enhanced Fire Giant. Not a chance for the Oni Warriors to even get back in. Neil jumps inside of the River's Rebuke. Will be picked up by Scary D and dropped right back into the Solar Scarabs' entire team. A stun right after. And Stewart will make sure that this one will make for a clean kill.
And this is just great positioning for the Scarabs. 3 Phoenixes down. You've got fire minions going forward and left. At the minimum, they're going to retake that Phoenix for you. At best, they're going to give you something to walk into the base for. You've got the same thing going on in mid, and now it's only 4 to defend against. If you can catch out one more person on the Warriors here, you might not even need to catch them out. If you can just find a kill, this Titan's yours.
Stewart's got ultimate still. Watch out for that Sanctified Field. It's a Winja Shamash in the backline. Stewart has expended both, or at least his Aegis as a relic so far. Sanctified Field finally dropped through. Vote able to get that ultimate off just in time to get out. But Dardes doesn't have that same luxury. He'll be taken down by the mid laner. Baronic picks up 1. The Scarabs pick up the Titan. And that'll be game 1 going to the Bug Boys.
That is one of the best Scarabs games I have ever seen. Just blanket statement, that was amazing from them. And it gives me flashbacks. I think we were talking about it a little bit close towards Worlds, where there was a discussion about, like, if we get to see this Scarabs show up, this one that we just saw more often, then they are going to give every other team in the league a run for their money and make them look not necessarily embarrassed, although that one was definitely a very, very controlling game. And they're definitely going to be able to flex around a lot more. So if they can bring that again in Game 2 and keep that level of play up, this is going to be one of the best teams in the SPL this year.
I mean, we hear it from the Scarabs players all the time. Once we figure out that mid and late game, the league is over. Have they figured out that mid and late game? Well, at least they have in game number 1. We'll see if they can do it in game number 2 right after this.
1.
Back to Season 9 of the SPL, powered, of course, by Prime Gaming. Prime Gaming, a service that comes with your Amazon Prime membership and gives you access to a whole bunch of benefits like Elder Scrolls Oblivion Game of the Year Edition and another world favorite, Turnip Boy Commits Tax Evasion. 2 games that will withstand the test of time, and all of that and more available with your Prime membership and, of course, with Prime Gaming. They're hand in hand, so if you don't have Amazon Prime, make sure to grab that, and you'll get Prime Gaming as well. And also subscribe to this channel with Amazon Prime. That's just a shameless plug. Shameless plug for the Solar Scarabs, though, after game number 1, and a game that is a fantastic start for the Scarabs.
Oh, yeah.
And I am just waiting for the ball to drop, right? Because of the way that the Scarab sets have gone recently. But they turn it, meaning history, around. They capitalize on some good fighting. There's one around the FG where they kind of bait the Oni Warriors in. And they end up taking game 1 and breaking a 6 individual game loss streak.
Yeah, I don't blame you for sort of watching and just going, okay, they have the lead. Yeah, we've seen this before. You know, when is it going to fumble? They have the lead. We've seen this before. When's it going to get even worse? It didn't get worse, and that time around, they were able to play extremely well. For me, Scary D played like old-time Scary D. I mean, this looked like the SP I used to watch back in the day where Scary D was just popping up. This King Arthur was looking extremely annoying to deal with. I mean, very oppressive onto the Oni Warriors.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the look that the Solar Scarabs were hoping to get out of Scary D, and just took a little bit of time to get there. King Arthur, again, vintage Scary D style pick. And this was the fight, Trelly, where this game is effectively sealed. I mean, it's already an 8,000 gold lead. But just look how active King Arthur is in this fight. Sets nearly everything up there and allows Baronic in the safety of the Charybdis to turn it around. And Stewart on this Ola run, despite maybe not being active in the landing phase early on, Trelly, right? I mean, it's not that strong early on. I think Stewart and Scary D both put together a really good fight, and this is the perspective I'm excited for. I imagine you're going to see a very, very active King Arthur, and one that takes over the fight.
Yeah, I mean, it's very easy to highlight Stewart, but he's looked good on this Ola run before. Scary D finally in this season on the new team. I've been waiting to see this style of play where he's just super annoying, constantly in the backline, spamming abilities, that sort of thing. This is the Scary D that I knew existed. I just wasn't sure when it was going to come out. We've seen Scream be able to get these early leads, and going for a very odd build there at that. I remember mentioning the fact that he got the CAD shield, not for his own healing, because he had none. It was for the Yemoja healing, trying to help out the squad. That sort of thing was very interesting. I think more of a supporty style jungle build on this Osiris. Either way, though, it just seemed like a very annoying play style for the carries of the Oni Warriors to have to deal with. Scary D really showed up here in this one, and obviously inbound on the Yemoja finally getting a win. I just saw him out there, and he said finally, like after, I don't know, this is probably...
Right, needed it.
Yeah, a lot of Yemoja losses to get to this point.
Yeah, to get to this point. A whole heap of 20,000 damage dealers for the Solar Scarabs. I'll give a shout out to... I'm just going to pronounce it this way. It could be wrong. I apologize. Salaj. Thank you for your Prime subscription with the comment, nice. So, nice to you. Thanks for the Prime subscription. Yeah, I'll give you some shout-outs if you sub with Prime. So if you've ever been hoping for that, now's your time. If you've ever been hoping for a Solar Scarab set win, now could be the time. Over the Oni Warriors in Game 2 would push them forward and officially stamp this as one of the hardest to predict SPL leagues maybe ever, because I'm going in to my production or my predictions today assuming that, you know, Bolts and Titans is kind of the tough one to predict, and it was, but now the Solar Scarabs have given us something to think about, and really the Oni Warriors something to think about. Trey, you see any glaring pick and ban issues from Game 1 where you feel like the Oni Warriors fell short, things need to take away? Difficult, I think, to maybe rewrite your entire strategy after a game, but not much worked for them there.
Yeah, I honestly don't think there was anything inherently wrong with their draft. It was more so just how do you stop the Solar Scarabs from running over you in the early game, because they can do it to pretty much anyone. That early game portion is where you don't want to try to lose, because once they were able to get to late game, I mean, you're facing a late game Oleron, a late game Charybdis, you have double ADCs, and no one was really able to deal with the King Arthur. So this time around, probably wanting to say, hey, number one, when does Stuart ever look this solid? It's usually on these magical ADCs. So if you are going to take away that Oleron, that definitely could be an option. But how often are we seeing Oleron banned away? There's so many good picks right now in that ADC role. Probably trying to say, hey, Nika, we need to get you on something that can be just as disruptive as Scary D was last game. And that's a good place to start.
Yep. Well, look, the player cams tell a decent story here. And the Solar Scarabs, a bit later, more airy, happier in their player booth right now, and I would be as well. I mean, we've mentioned the story behind this team and how they've gotten themselves out to plenty of leads here over their last few sets, just haven't turned many of them into wins. So I think getting just back to a winning way is a weight off for this Solar Scarabs team, and it's so early on in Season 9. There's so much room to grow. Your year is far from over when you're losing these sets, but always feels good to win regardless of how early on in the year you are. P's and B's for game number 2 will show us maybe a change of strategy for the Oni Warriors, potentially the same strategy for the Solar Scarabs. Daji will continue to get banned out. 61% ban rate, followed by Klidna at a 68% ban rate. We would normally see an Erlang Shen, not available to be played here this week. And so I don't think regardless, or I think regardless rather, who's playing Trelly, we're going to see Klidna, Daji, Kaprakan, the likes of those taken away. But here's your first big adjustment, the Oleron out of Stuart's hands.
I think this was a smart call. I mean, Stuart rarely is able to affect the game this much, except on a pick like Oleron. I mean, if you're going to sit in the lane, and the Osiris is going to be taken away as well, so no stock into Bobby's Yamoja. He's going to instantly lock that one back into play. I mean, they first picked it last time. They didn't ban it away. They're going to first pick it again. So obviously the Solar Scarabs, no problem drafting this healing. So much control with the River's Rebuke. And inbound has been looking very solid on the pick. So this time around, they're going to lock that one in right away. The Oni Warriors, though, they had to know this was coming. What's the answer back? I mean, they knew that this was what they were forcing them into. They have to get a strong 1-2 here.
Well, I think it's important that the Oni Warriors took away that Sanctified Field, because if you talk about controlling space, the River's Rebuke plus Sanctified Field was just too much. So at least you've taken away half of that. Artio and ESET, strong frontline control for Nika. And then what we assume to be a good mid lane pick here for Dardez. Neither of those two players really had the opportunity to show much to us in game number 1. And so it's going to be a solo lane pivot here, Trelly. And maybe the banning of the Oleron opens up your picks. I mean, Camazotz might have been a direct result of the Oleron being picked. Artio has always been one of the best looks for Nika.
Yeah, and you never have to ban away the King Arthur with Artio available. I mean, so many cripples to shut down his abilities, his dashes, that sort of thing. There's a lot of abilities that King Arthur uses to try to traverse around the map that the cripple field from Artio just shuts down entirely. So right now, first picking that, you automatically are forcing Scary D into something else or having to deal with arguably one of the worst solo lane matchups that are out there right now. So I think there probably will be another pivot to be made. The Solar Scarabs have a few little seconds here to figure out what they want to do.
Not forget
it looks
the
like
name,
Morgan Le Fay is going to be
Le
the
Fay.
option. Now, usually, usually you would think that's mid, but we have seen Scream pilot this Morgan Le Fay jungle, and we've seen him do it pretty well.
Yeah, we have. But, well, okay, so I was going to say we've also seen Baronic play the Morgan Le Fay a handful of times, and it's looked good for Baronic. So, surprising. Yeah, no kidding, Dave. The mid laners played Morgan Le Fay. Yeah, but when you're talking about the Scarabs, things get a little weird. Charybdis has been a strong pick for Baronic. When the AMC has been banned out, sometimes that's been the answer. Not recently, because Charybdis hasn't been available, but AMC not banned out this game. There's also entirely a world where nothing weird is going on here, and it's just Morgan Le Fay mid, Charybdis for Stuart. And a few of those answers will be revealed to us a bit later on. Now time for the Oni Warriors to take one more. Depending on if we think this Morgan Le Fay goes jungle or not, I think that could change up maybe some of the draft strategy here for the Oni Warriors. Get something else away from Scream. But it looks like the Oni Warriors happy to play things safe. Something that likely would have been banned out in the Khepri ends up being Neilma's pick.
Yeah, a safe bet. You don't have to try and predict what the Solar Scarabs are cooking up. You can just say, hey, let's just grab our support right now. We already know we're going to be against this Yamoja in the dual lane. We don't have to worry about what that ADC is. We're just going to grab Khepri. Very safe pick in its own right, provides a solid amount of clear, and then it's one of those playstyles you have to adhere to. You have to put respect on Scarab's Blessing, because you never know if you can go in here. There's no executes on the map just yet. The Solar Scarabs have the option of drafting into those, and the Oni Warriors, they're going to ban away Bologna, so Achilles still an option if they want to try and counter out that Scarab's Blessing, but it's still one of those playstyles you have to say, can we go in here? Is the revive going to be too much? Can we kill someone twice? And that's going to be very annoying to deal with.
Yeah, I wonder if the Oni Warriors do end up banning out Achilles, because that's something that's so strong for Scary D. Now, I made a promise. I did say I'd shout out some Prime subs, so I'll catch back up on a few of those. Blind Lethality, thanks for your sub. Wissy, W-I-H-S-E-A, thanks for your Prime sub, and Irish Luck, thanks for your Prime sub, as well as Brooklyn's Finest and Yingling with your Tier 1 sub. So thank you guys. Feels like a streamer in here. We're running the death segment, but thanking everyone for their subscriptions. The Oni Warriors do indeed end up banning out the Achilles, and that'll take away some of the steal potential, or the execute potential when it comes to the Scarab's Blessing, as well as a Nem ban up against Cuvo Fred. Cuvo Fred just could not get much going in game number 1 here for the Oni Warriors, so I think that's got to be something you maybe even consider. Again, if you're not certain that that's a Scream pick in the Morgan Le Fay, maybe you give Cuvo Fred a little bit more emphasis here. But instead it's going to be vote grabbing the Chernobog.
Yeah, that is going to be an interesting one because of Chernobog's global pressure. So now you have two things you have to adhere to. Can I go in? Can I make use out of the Scarab's Blessing? And or can I go shut down this split push that the Chernobog's doing, because he could his ult to the other side of the map, and now we're fighting a man down. So the Oni Warriors definitely trying to answer back here the different side of strategy. The ESET has the best confirm tool on the map. We already know the objective pressure is going to be pretty solid here for the Oni Warriors. Now we finally get to see what the Solar Scarabs draft is going to round out to. Is this going to be that Morgan Le Fay jungle that we've seen? Is it going to be a Charybdis mid? Or is none of that accurate? I mean, there's a few different options here, and the chalk.
That doesn't help.
I was going to be honest, that does not answer my questions, because we've seen the jungle, we've seen the chalk solo. So really, until we see this one, there we go. Now we know for a fact. Okay, so Scream is the only person on the Scarabs that's going to be playing Naja. So that's got to be chalk solo, Morgan Le Fay mid, and Charybdis in the duo lane.
Yeah, but Naja still raises some eyebrows here, Trelly, to be totally honest. We have not seen Naja ever, really. What, one pick, one ban was something like what those percentages looked like. So there's good setup with the Naja. Is the knockdown there? Are you sure you have it with the Morgan Le Fay, the Charybdis? You can chain some of that together. And then the Shiva ends up being jungle pick for Cuvo Fred. So what a strange jungle dynamic we've got going into game 2. Naja up against Shiva.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one, but I will say I think Naja sort of has a pseudo-execute in the fact that unless the Scarab's Blessing gets off before you take them up and they are in that threshold to die, you can't really res off of that. You can also ult the Khepri and then find another option for a kill, so there's a few different avenues for you to try to get value out of this Naja pick. But more often than not, Scream is the one piloting this Naja, right? We see this, we saw it a lot last year. There used to be a famous tweet where Scream just said, you can't get me Naja, man, and that is true. I mean, it was true. Not so much now. I mean, Naja does not have that high of a win rate whenever it does get played. Usually, it just gets beads out. You have to play this pick extremely well, and even when you're playing it that well, the follow-up has to be there. And right now, they have decent follow-up, as you mentioned. There's a few different avenues to, maybe land in a River's Rebuke, Morgan Le Fay with a strong amount of follow-up there, but it's going to be, can this Naja find those early ganks? Can you find the pressure out of the Windfire wheels? It really just depends.
I mean, if anyone's going to do it, I imagine it might be Scream. Well, let's continue celebrating our partnership with Prime Gaming and shouting out a couple more Prime subs that have rolled through. Thugnificence, fantastic name. Thanks for your Prime sub. And Osifu, thank you as well for your Prime sub. Keep those rolling through, and I'll keep shouting them out here on the desk. Time for the Oni Warriors to bounce back, though, and they've got a well-rounded composition here, Trelly. Something that has been strong for Dardez with the ESET. The Chernobog, of course, as you've mentioned, can be pretty dynamic. On the flip side, I think Chernobog and Morgan Le Fay could prove difficult to dive. We know that Morgan Le Fay can peel out for herself some, and Charybdis, of course, very safe. How concerned are you about the Oni Warriors and their ability to get to that backline?
Yeah, it's going to be hard. I mean, you just mentioned the self-peel from Morgan Le Fay, enough, right, to try and having to deal with that. But there's also a lot of safety. Cryptus can just be damage immune for so long and sort of kite around, wait for inbound and try and get over to help with the Emoja. Then you get the heals and the River's Rebuke. There's a lot of different comp strategies here that I'm seeing for the Solar Scarabs, but the Oni Warriors, I think they got exactly what they wanted. Barring this Shiva pick, this could be something that Cuvo finds a lot of success on. We haven't really seen how much he's able to do on it just yet. It's found a lot of early pressure. I mean, we've seen the Shiva in the SPL a few times now. Very popular in that jungle role, so it's going to be an interesting one.
Can the Solar Scarabs right the ship and get back in the set win column? Or will the Oni Warriors send us to our second game 3 of the day? Let's go to game 2 to find out.
Yeah, well, we see the old Scarabs curse of going to a third game kind of no matter what happens, whether it be a game 1 win or a game 2 win at its team. Or can the Oni Warriors, keep that one going? So the Solar Scarabs close this one out. It's J-Mac, it's Gore here in game number 2. And Scream on the Naja. God, we don't see very often, but whenever we do tend to see this god, it's more often than not going to be going on to Scream. We've seen it also a couple of times. I want to say Captain Twig is another one of those players who's also brought this one out there.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've gotten to see Naja played typically.
Period.
Yeah, well, yeah, like maybe just period. It's something that can come through and I think look really, really good. We used to see a lot of Naja support, right? Last year it ended up kind of making, I think, a bigger splash. 2 years ago was a pretty big splash. But it's that question of whether or not, like Trelly said, like, you know you're going into this. You know that these guys have the reaction speed, that beads are going to come through for your Sash and your ult pretty much every single time. So where are your win conditions? Well, a lot of it is going to be going back to those guys. If they use the beads the first time, first off, you got them a little opening. And it's just going to be that question of, do you have, I guess I don't know if I want to use the term the talent to make it work, but like the capabilities to make this pick work. Scream has time and time and time and time again showcase that yes, the answer to that is just blatantly yes. And so I'm excited to watch what this does, but I think it's got some interesting picks around it. I'm curious to watch Stuart over there in the duo lane on the Charybdis. It's been a while since we've seen Stuart pilot Charybdis,
Right.
because it feels like it's been so good for Baronic, as well as getting a chalk pickup for them. I think Scary D was a huge asset for them in game number 1, creates so much space, is just absolute nuisance in the backline. This Chalk doesn't have the same capabilities like in full as a King Arthur, but he brings different things to the table, right? Big, slow, huge silence, a lot of pressure that he can bring, and he can do it for a long time as well, so that sustain ability that he brings makes it a lot more interesting, and I just want to see how he's going to make this one shake out.
Isn't it hilarious that we also live in a world where we see a Solar Scarabs draft, we see a Morgan Le Fay locked in, and now we all have to question who
Immediately
that
they're
god
like,
is going to. It's
well.
like, Morgan Le Fay, that's, actually, I don't know if that one's going to the mid lane or not, but with this time around, it will be going over to mid. How do you kind of feel about Morgan Le Fay with the Naja combo there?
Well, realistically, you should have a lot of damage, right? Like, if you get the combos off right and they all land in the right area, that's the best thing about Naja. You know where they're going to end up. You should be able to have really clean follow-up, should be able to find kills. I'm curious about the first couple of levels. I don't think they're going to have the same amount of pressure in mid between the Naja. I think like the ring toss slow, Sash, it's going to be good. It's just the damage that has like a question mark around it for me. And it's, you're going up against something that has a good silence, a good CC in terms of a Spirit Ball. So those first couple of levels might not be as explosive. At the same time, if you get caught out like ESET when you have something like the universal ring toss and it does a massive slow onto someone who has otherwise no escape, that could result in a kill. So I think a lot of it depends on like Dardez's positioning, how the Warriors end up approaching a lot of these fights. And so that's going to be the shakeup, I think, in that mid 2v2. And so I think that elevates this Morgan Le Fay into something that could absolutely pop off. And it also takes it to something that might take a little bit of time to actually show up and be a little more present.
Well, apologies for the delays. We are getting ourselves right back in game here very shortly. Just want to make sure we can get our last player loaded right back into this one here. The Oni Warriors now down this 1-0. I mean, we saw their comeback potential against the Kings last week.
Yes.
We saw how they can also just absolutely dominate a set, just like the same one with the Kings last week. We've also seen their fight back against some of those other tops like the Leviathans previously. Coming into here against the Scarabs, they've now put Nika on one of these very bulky frontline style of gods with this Ardio. We always talk about how difficult it is to kill an Ardio, how difficult it is to peel an Ardio away from you. And then you throw in Cubo Fred, who's just going to add an immense amount of extra CC and a lot of extra noise in the midst of these fights on the Shiva.
Yeah, I think the conversation of this game to me, it falls into like two categories. Inbound had a phenomenal Yemoja game last time. But now you have to make that Yemoja, that exact same gameplay, be worth as much as what the Ardio is going to be able to bring, right? And so that's going to be, I think, a really big thing to check in on throughout this game is what exactly is Ardio doing for the team versus what exactly is the Yemoja bringing as we check in with it over and on. The other part of that is going to be dealing with, Scarabs Blessing, dealing with Circle of Protection, two big ults on the Warriors. And I think the third one that might honestly end up being the most important of them all. How's Cuvo faring in the jungle versus Scream faring in the jungle? I think Scream's on a pick that we know Scream for and are comfortable with. Cuvo's been back and forth.
Inbound doesn't have any healing to his name just yet. Only has the HP 5 coming from that buff, plus some of those health potions ticking away to give him a little bit of extra HP. But Vote and Neil have been able to get nice combo setups with that. The root from the Khepri sets up perfectly for this Chernobog to get that full combo off. Double Riptide from Inbound. Will now put Neilma in danger. A big stun. Stewart, though, not quite enough damage to finish off that kill there. Both supports low, and all it will take is one rotation from a jungler to try and pop that one back there. Stewart has got to use those beads. A good root again from Neil is going to put a lot of pressure in this duo.
Yeah, and I like to see this. Both of the supports, both the carries, a little bit of pressure from back each team. The beads being down on one side with the shells down for both supports makes it, I guess, overall like a favorable trade still, leaning towards the Warriors just because Vote has that survivability. And soon enough, I think Vote is going to be able to do a little bit more. Both of these hunters have a lot of interesting dynamics to them just because they both have something that gets them off the battlefield and can allow them to dodge out a lot of damage. Vote dashing into the wall, Stewart turning into a literal whirlpool. And then they both have an ult that can save their lives, whether it's CC immunity. Hold that thought, Scary. He's in trouble.
He can't get out. The cripple field coming out of Nika was locking him in place for so long that he couldn't teleport out. It's Cuvo Fred to come up with the first blood for the side of the Oni Warriors and get themselves on the board early on. But we saw this last time around where the Warriors were able to make some early waves and kills.
Well, that's a really important kill, I think, for the Warriors. Like you said, though, we've seen it happen Inbound. Oh, one more side. Throws down the second, yeah, just for good measure. I was like, I see the Omi. I know you got it. You just got to be able to dash. Does manage to get out of there. But, last game, start off with a really good couple of kills from the Warriors. But it was some of the fights afterward, I think, that the Scarabs were able to truly take advantage of. A lot of them around, like, invades. That's the problem. I think this comp doesn't do their early game that they played last time quite as well as what we just saw in Game 1. And so if the Warriors can continue for little picks like that, whether it's onto the chalk, although ideally maybe you turn it to a couple of other places, getting Ardio ahead is going to be more than fine for any team. I think that if you can get a little bit of pressure in mid, things like that, then the Warriors are going to be off to a really good kickoff for this one. But there's still a lot of fight back potential for the Scarabs, and I think as long as the game stays roughly in this state, right, not too far behind, or even if you're able to pull a lead, you're going to be able to find some interesting fights.
Look, it's the Scarabs doing Scarab things. Scream hits the ultimate with no setup there. Dardes on landing will pop the beads. Going from Baronic, who's got to use his own ultimate, but the dance from Cubo Fred is doing too much damage back. Dardes credited to the first kill of the engagement, and Cubo Fred will chase down Scream and pick up the second one. Now 3 up for the Warriors.
And that's maybe the best example I can give you of Scream's going to be able to go up with the ult and set up anybody. You know exactly where they're going to land. It is just the question of, do you have the damage as an early Morgan, or Morgan Le Fay, to actually get this to be a kill? And the answer there was no, right? Even without Circle of Protection, I think Dardes there has, just a sliver of health still in their favor. With Circle of Protection, it becomes a lot easier for them to turn things around. And Cuvo's healing, as well as the damage output from the dance, it was just a little bit too much to worry about. So the Scarabs, I like where their mind's at. I think that's a smart play to try and go for. I just don't know that I think they needed the check, right? That was the check of, can we make this happen? And the answer is an overwhelming no. Unfortunately, that overwhelming no cost you 2 kills on 2 very important roles, and you're going to have to hit the pause button on aggression like that for a little while. I still think they have good scaling, But this is a really good way to start things off if you're the Warriors, just because the Scarabs unfortunately kind of fall prey to their own trappings.
I mean, as long as Dardes has that circle of protection, if he's getting ulted at full HP on landing, he should be able to throw that and get a lot of value there too. So maybe once some anti-heal comes online for Baronic, maybe make that a little bit less valuable here. But props to Scream for hitting that ultimate with no extra setup there, holding on to that sash towards the landing phase at that point here. But the Oni Warriors, with these few kills they've gotten early on, have been able to net nearly a 2,000 gold lead here, sitting about 1,700 up so far, and 2K experience. That's a lot of XP going the way of the Warriors this early on.
Yeah, and you can see, I think, a lot of it manifesting mainly right now in the jungle as well as there for the Khepri. But there's a small lead still for Nika. There's a small lead still, I think, there for Dardes. But Cuvo, and again, Cuvo is the guy to watch, I think, for this team. Very, very accomplished player over their career, right? Took them a while to finally get to that World Championship portion. Finally got themselves a win there and did kind of what the checklist, I think, would be for someone who's played as long as they are. But rides the emotions of this team, I think, very, very closely, right? Every win for them is a huge bolster from the mood that Cuvo gets to bring to the booth. And I think you can see it, especially when we watch the player cams, but there's like a lot of conversations, a lot of comms coming down from Neil. And I think right now that amount of control and what they're exerting onto the map is just giving the Warriors enough of an edge that the Scarabs don't have a lot of ways back in, especially with that start they had. Everything's a little more devastating. And so they really are playing, I think, more of a waiting game right now, trying to delay until they feel like they can truly find these fights. And honestly, it might be a couple of levels before they feel as confident as they could.
We'll say it was a lot of fun having these Warriors over into the studio. We'll hold that thought for a moment there. Inbound, Heather's rebuke, but rooted out twice with no escape to find a way out of here. Vote will pick up the kill on the inbound and put up a number 4 for the Oni Warriors in this early game. But as I was going to go through, I mean, we had the Warriors here in studio this past week for their media day, and you know, most of the stuff that we do with those guys, it does end up going up onto the YouTube channel, the SMITE Pro. But one of the things that doesn't make it up there is that very early opening, kind of
1 hour
set of games that we do, this 1 hour block with them. And let me tell you, man, the communication with these guys, even though these are just games against viewers, they're having some fun, it's random level 20 arena games that they're doing no minion kind of nonsense with. Their communication level, even during that, it's astounding what these guys are able to really just get across to each other with such minimal actual wordage used.
And it ends up being a double thing. If you're watching, you're ever like, man, how can I play against some of my favorite pro players in like the silliest game modes? Wednesdays at 1, man. That's where you want to be. Whenever we hang out, like whichever team we come in, we throw them in the booth for a little bit. They get to play around. It's been a lot of fun. And I enjoy watching it just because, again, like how you mentioned it, like the Warriors, you're playing like random pick on what was it? They did a slash, I know, to kick things off.
Oh, God, yeah, that slash
things were just
brutal.
like absolutely ridiculous to watch and very fun to see the teams.
Inbound, we'll get plucked back yet again into another route, and this is the combo that is just absolutely decimating this duo lane. I mean, we had the changes to diminishing returns in this patch as well, so CC is kind of quote-unquote less effective, even more so now when you start stacking up more. But Khepri's isn't going to be affected by that. That pull isn't gonna really worry about it. And the root's not going to be affected necessarily by it unless it's by another root. Baronic will be pulled back in, throws out the ultimate, but once again to no avail. This Oni Warriors early game is absolutely stomping through the Scarabs.
Now this is going to be a fun question for the Scarabs. A lot of it is immediately...
Well, I may have lost you there for a moment, Gore. I think you kicked a little cable out at that point
guess
there.
so.
But, hey, there you go. We'll get you back now.
It's just the question of late game, right? When it comes down to whether or not the Scarabs think they can hold on to their own and control this, right? And we saw this from the Warriors last week. You asked Cuvo after their win versus Game 1 in the Kings, and they straight up said, yeah, we just knew we had a better late game. Doesn't matter that we fell behind, what, like 12K. They still managed to continue pushing forward. If the Scarabs at this point can maintain this amount of a deficit, like the kills look dramatic. If you look up and you see 6-0, even to me, that it feels dramatic. But when you look at the gold, granted 9 minutes in, it's not as bad as it could be. I mean, look, I'm going to be honest with you, no sugarcoating it. This is not a great spot for the Scarabs, and after the Game 1 they had, this is not the kind of showcasing I think you want to be able to show if you can do that multiple times. But I don't think this is so crippling that you can't fight back.
Scream pulled back in. This dual lane wombo combo between Neil and Vote. It's just been absolutely devastating, but Vote goes in a little too far, maybe a little too aggressive. He won't go down, but he will not be able to close out that kill. Scream barely squeaks himself on out of there, and Baronic able to juke out the spirit ball from Dardes. Somehow Scream able to make it out of there.
And honestly, it costs a lot, right? Like, you've got to use this Aegis, you've got to use the Windfire wheels. You are not going to be a very active Najah for a little while. Meanwhile, guess what? The Warriors can keep on getting active, keep on CC chaining everybody, keep on getting aggressive versus the Scarabs, and finding a lot of farm and experience because of it. One level there for solo, one in jungle. You're seeing one down in the duo for both of the players.
Uh-oh.
They need some kills on the Scarabs to balance things out.
Yoma misses the pluck. The Dragonflight will push him back. Scream even getting a little bit aggressive there. Stewart throws out the ult, but doesn't grab anything with it. And instead, it's Cuvo Fred to walk over. And that second ability and clean up another kill. 7-0 now. Reads the kills. 3,000 gold separating the teams. And Scary D, at this point, having to essentially ult just to try and secure one of his own buffs. Scream can't even walk through his own jungle. My lord, Cuvo is doing so much damage to him. That fire, and then the Pillar of Dawn right after Cuvo Fred is on a rampage right now. 5-0 to start this game off.
That was a sick play. Like, yeah, that was nuts from Cuvo, and really good at controlling Scream. And like you said, knocking him off the map. A 5-0 start for the jungler. I mentioned it earlier. That's the check-in. If you want to look at who's having a better performance right now, it's hands down Cuvo, and there's not even a conversation to be had about it. We've seen one successful ult from Scream, and it resulted in 2 people on the Scarabs dying. Meanwhile, Cuvo has been all across the map, finding tons of kills and a lot of pressure. And so I think that you need a huge turnaround out of the jungle. I see a Transcendence to get picked up. For Scream, again, if we're talking late game and we're talking power spikes later on, this is going to be great. For the first, 12 minutes so far, the Scarabs have had very little to say in this conversation between them and the Warriors. And I don't know how much of it, like a little bit of it's their fault, right? Like going for some plays early on, a little bit aggressive, that ends up not going quite the way they want them to. That's just going to happen sometimes. Ever since then, it's just the Warriors playing really cleanly and looking for the setup, and they have so much follow-through.
There's some good follow-up against Neil's pluck specifically. Baronic gets the push with the Dragonfly back against Cuvo. One of the strengths that this Morgan Le Fay does still have is that second ability to just get people off of you right away there. The knock up immediately into a push. Baronic, though, does miss that Shroud of Wildfire right after Spirit Ball. Not going to hit Scream. And a Riptide by inbound will slightly displace, but there are 4 chasing down the mid laner. The Solar Scarabs. Baronic has nowhere to go. Cuvo Fred chasing in, but Vote grabbing the kill. Scream goes in aggressively, but doesn't use the ultimate onto Neil Ma. Stuns and some bubbles by inbound. Get a lot of damage back onto Neil Ma. Stewart is trying to find his way into this fight. He'll pick up Neil Ma all the while through, but it's Cuvo Fred dancing on 2. The fire damage is just too much for these 2 to handle. The Cuvo sidesteps them all, coming from the carry. Maybe he can find another one under the tower. No! He uses a little bit of extra immunity to get himself out of that tower while Nika cleans up the kill on inbound.
And then it's just one more. You get the full-on deicide. Baronic just now respawns. The worst part of that fight for the Warriors is that afterward, there's not a whole lot you can do 13 minutes in. I'm surprised they don't maybe rush straight down for a Pyromancer, but you get to see pretty much everything in their arsenal and what it can bring to the team fight there. Cuvo, again, playing out of his damn mind. 6-0-7. I think this Shiva has just been everywhere. Good damage, good healing, and good presence in terms of control. And then you've got so much from everybody else. I mean, Dardes in terms of CC and damage that he's bringing, and specifically Vote's global presence. Being able to rotate in a lot faster than Stewart, get a lot more damage done than Stewart before the fight starts to peter out. By the time Stewart makes it there, it's just a little bit too late. They do manage to pull back 1, and that's a small win. I think that the Scarabs are able to now not get blanked, but that kind of fight around your tier 2 and mid, no Fire Giant, and just this gold lead, you're going to need now a lot more to fight back into this. Earlier I was saying that you're not necessarily completely shut out by the gold lead, and you're still in that position. But you can't play, as risky. Like being up here for inbound, you need more backup, right? You need to be able to set up for a kill. You might be able to find it in a 2v1, but level experience is really starting to favor the Warriors. So you need something big to go in your favor.
Oh, Ma not going to connect there. A dash into the wall by Vote means that he'll find a way out. Neil finds a route, but it's an ultimate on the screen to pick up the support. Not doing a whole lot of damage at the top, so he's gonna need some help down below, but the Dragonflight puts him right behind the Riptide, but unfortunately Neil is just a little too bulky and ends up getting hit right back into it. Vote though, back in the fight, and it's a 4 versus 2, but look how much damage that Cubo Fred is doing to everybody. First tick of the ultimate, takes down one, uses the rest to chase down Baronic, but has Cubo Fred stepped too far? The answer is no, because Vote has picked up Scream, and Baronic and Inbound are on the run.
And now with the chase down, I mean, Vote might be able to go down. Yeah, Inbound, Scary D are doing a lot for this fight. They're finally getting more kills, and I think it's favoring them slightly, but the problem is Cubo is just doing too much. Dardes exists too much. And J-Mac,
Wow.
that's the second deicide in like 3 minutes. I appreciate, I think, where the Scarabs are at, but that fight starts with such a heavy investment into Neil that it already feels like it's not going to be worth it for you, right? Like, you're dumping everything you can, and you still barely get the kill onto the support. Afterward, you're able to pick up a little bit more. Finally, yeah, you're able to kill off Vote. But when you've got a Shiva that's 8-0 and 9, an ESET in mid that's 4-0 and 7, you're not dealing with enough of the problems here. And so, you know, small skirmishes that I think are big wins for the Scarabs, or at least small wins for the Scarabs, don't just pale in comparison to the 5-level gap that exists in jungle right now. 2 levels for both mid and carries, although just ticking over to 5 for Stewart. I mean, the Warriors got themselves a lead early on. They played well with that lead. They furthered that lead. And now we're getting to the point where you're forcing the Oni Furies, and you don't need to worry too much about the Scarab stepping up. I think you force this fight, and you're going to be able to find picks. Then you can go for a Pyro, and we're starting to get to the timer where, with this kind of lead, a Fire Giant is not out of the question if you get yet another deicide.
Cubo Fred has just been a menace on this Shiva. Meanwhile, Inbound, maybe trying to steal away this Oni Fury. It's just him versus 2. Neil Maul will go back at the pluck onto Inbound, who does have enough Omi to try and find an escape path. One Riptide will get him some distance. Doesn't need that second one just yet. It says back to the Oni Fury. Solar Scarabs get the Pyromancer. And in a 2v3 situation, it will be Cubo going down. A massive pick here for the Solar Scarabs. Nika on the run as 4 are here
massive
to slow them down. 2 out of the Warriors now gone. The Solar Scarabs starting up the Fire Giant?
Then, honestly, I love this play. At the minimum, you bait in the Warriors. I think if Inbound had a little more health, you probably go for it a little more and with a little more gusto. But that's killing Cubo might be the biggest thing on the board right now. That's such a big bounty that you're able to pull into your favor, and you keep some of the experience. I mean, look at that chunk, right? I mean, we're talking 8,000 prior to that fight, 5,000 afterward. 3,000 swing is going to help elevate everybody on the Scarabs, make this fight a lot closer. I mean, we were almost to the point where I was grasping at straws for them just before that fight. Like, if they lose the Fury, then the Pyromancer, and, you know, they don't get any of those kills, then we're starting to talk about the fact that it's like, okay, cool, well, I'm talking about game 3 at this point. Now, they've opened up a much easier conversation. The level lead is starting to shift over. That's such a big kill for Baronic. Actually gets him slightly ahead of Dardes in terms of experience. You can see catching up in the jungle, what was essentially 4 levels is now slowly becoming 2. And so they take a deep breath. They're back in this. Speeds are down overall for Scream, and that's not going to be helpful, but it's not going to be hurtful. The downside is they weren't able to get a Fire Giant. I think if you get a Fire Giant there, it's maybe not massive, but you get rid of tier 1s and probably a couple of the tier 2s, right? You're not getting a Phoenix. You're just opening up the base, getting some gold back in your pockets to alleviate the pressure otherwise that the Warriors have applied. They showcased a lot of promise in that, and now being able to close up a lot of the gaps that were really causing them pain. This is a team that could step up to defend a Fire Giant and not have to worry too badly about what the Warriors are going to provide.
And the Warriors were really on the hunt for maybe a kill there, but they'll only get a tier 1 tower away from the Solar Scarabs. That right side solo lane tower does go down. And just now, only tier 2s left on the side of the Solar Scarabs. Meanwhile, the Warriors holding to all 6 of their towers. There's a little bit of gold to still be had on the map for both of these 2 teams here. But that one team fight does shore that gold lead up to only around that 5K mark. The experiences you highlighted kind of closing itself up a little bit here. Cubo Fred very close to that level 20 mark right now. But Neilma finds Scary D, pulls him back in. And this damage out of Cubo Fred will be enough to force Scary D to ult, but he gets rooted out yet again and body blocked into the wall. Will the River's Rebuke be enough to get him out? Yes, it will.
That's a great
Inbound coming up big to save his solo.
You lose Scary D there. Fire Giant started up by the Warriors. They're forcing a fight because it's a 4v5, and they know they've got plenty of time. So Huge play from inbound. And granted, again, heavy investment to keep him alive for Scary D, but they're alive. And that's what matters most at the end of the day. You have that presence from the chalk, and they get to sit back. They get to farm back up. The Warriors don't get to take a massive lead. And this is where the glory of the map is actually kind of playing in favor of the Scarabs right now. Putting pressure on a tier 2 without a massive minion wave is going to be very dangerous for the Warriors, right? And so you can see Vote pushing up over there and left. Mid's going to get cleared up. This is going to be where you can maybe win some of the map state, is if Vote gets something. Otherwise, there's no Fury, there's no Pyromancer, there's not a lot to fight over other than the FG.
Oh, hey, lather, rinse, repeat. We saw this earlier on Scary D. Once again now on inbound, but the Riptide faded away. Inbound needs a way out, but he can't get to his second portal in time. Vote closed out the kill. He was all the way in the left side of the map. Scary D was forced to rotate over to deal with that. And now the Scarabs are on a deficit here. Fire Giant started up by the Oni Warriors, and nobody on the Scarabs can get there in time to slow this one down or stop it. That's going to be the largest of the neutral objectives on the map going to the Warriors.
So all those things I said about Scary D going down are just as applicable with inbound going down, and unfortunately, when inbound does die there, that ends up creating an even bigger opportunity. Now, all of a sudden, it's not just, okay, you know, you're playing with the map state in your favor. Fire Giant on the other side, these tier 2s are going to be something that are slowly getting knocked off the table. You might be able to, with inbound respawning, might be able to step up and defend one. It is taking a while just to burn through right. And so that showcases, I think, where the Scarabs' presence should be. Where Scary D is, that's not the answer.
That's risky.
I don't think you chase down this team. They're going to go for it, and maybe it's risky. Maybe you get a win out of it, but really you're just trying to strip away some FGs. They're going deep for this, though. I think that this is a team where you could very easily, especially with this composition, mount a defense around a mid-tier 2 or a left-tier 2, although that one's already at half, so it might be a little worse here than the other. And I think that Phoenix defenses are going to be pretty swell for you as well. The ults you have, nice and large, again, controlling that they're going to be able to bring. But you aren't, I think, in a position to try and make the calls of let's get aggressive and let's try to fight into them. That hasn't been working for a majority of the game. Granted, you're starting to get rid of a lot of the experience leads because we're starting to see these level 20s getting hit. So there is conversation for the Scarabs, at least in terms of experience. But the gold deficit is definitely going to rear its face in a couple of these engagements. Just tier 3s that are finished where there's tier 2s on the other side, or power spikes that the Warriors have managed to pick up that the Scarabs just haven't hit yet, is going to give them a small advantage in every individual fight. And so I think at this point, pull back. I like where they're pushing up just because of the pressure they have on the map. It's burned down 2 minutes of an FG. And so they are at least making sure that their presence is known, but I like that they're not going for the fight, because right now, I don't think that this is the kind of spot that you want to get that aggressive in. Instead, you want to try and either mount up next to this mid-tier 2, or wait for these Phoenixes and wait for the Warriors to come to you. Otherwise, continuing to push up, make sure that nothing's threatening the Phoenixes, nothing's threatening the base, that's going to be their best play.
It's a very slow push here by the Warriors on these towers. I mean, we saw the first one on the right side of the map go down. The Oni Warriors all back themselves up. Then they go and take away the Fury. That Gold Fury goes down quickly, and then they make their way over to the left side and finally drop that. But well, there's only a minute and a half left on this Fire Giant buff. Not much more time that the Warriors have to work with this one. Maybe one more tier 2 tower, open up all 3 of those Phoenixes as an option here. But on returning to base here, we do see that Cuvo Fred is nearly finished on his build. Protector of the Jungle. That's his upgrade for the starter item, and going in towards at least that tier 2 Cloak of Concentration. Still has a couple of options there between Spirit Robe and Mantle. We've seen a hot rise of Spirit Robe as of late, so I wouldn't be surprised if that ends up being the choice that he goes with here. Might need a little bit more than that to get out of there. Looks like he does have enough to dash away here, but he gets the ult out of Baronic in response.
Yeah, if Cuvo dies there, that's a massive win for the Scarabs, especially with the timers. Granted, like you said, it almost like this has the air about it of like the Fire Giant has like 10 seconds left and it's about to disappear. Like I was thinking, oh yeah, if you can kill him in the next 5 seconds, then cool, he won't be there for the next FG fight. And then I had to do like a double take because I remembered that we're still 30 seconds left on the power play for him. I don't know, it's been a very, I want to say like lackluster, not very glamorous, right? Star-studded Fire Giant, but it's got the job done. I mean, look how much they were able to clear off the map, how much gold they've managed to pick up if you're the Warriors. It's just whether or not you want to go for this Phoenix. 20 seconds left on the buff. They're going to start it.
They're going to jump in. It'll be Nika at the front line. Inbound gets plucked back in, and he's already dead. The River's Rebuke didn't even finish casting at that point. Scream has one up in the sky. It's Cuvo Fred will eat a lot of damage through. Ultimate from Stewart will get the beads out of Dardas, but Dardas is back to full. Scream is down to nothing, and Scary D drops down to a vote as Neil brings one more back alive. Baronic on the run with that ultimate, but he cannot run, and he cannot outpace the bear. Nika chasing him out. Baronic with nowhere to go, falls to the solo laners, and the Solar Scarabs and the Oni Warriors, they're going to be going up to game number 3 with the Warriors taking down Stewart and taking down the Titan.
Yeah, I think game 1 is just very clean from the Scarabs. Again, an early game lead that they managed to grow into something beautiful. This time around, it's essentially the virtual, it is the opposite, right? An early game lead for the Warriors that they grow into something massive. But I think they showcase a lot more of a dominating presence throughout a lot of that. And it's just in terms of where are you going to showcase here. I think there was moments early on for the Scarabs to fight back and where they had opportunities to potentially find a fight that could have gone in their favor. But each one of those was preceded almost immediately by a pick by the Warriors where they just, oh cool, we found Scream just slightly out of position. We found Inbound just slightly out of position, and we chewed them up and tore them apart. And now, where are they going to go? They're going to go back into the base, and so it creates an easy opportunity for them to then move forward and take any of the objectives.
Well, with that win out of the Oni Warriors here in Game 2, that means that we're going to be going to another Game 3 out here between these two teams. We'll take it to a quick break, and then we'll come back to the desk right after.
We had a whole lot of game threes yesterday and a whole lot of game threes today. One more as the Oni Warriors take game number 2 over the Solar Scarabs. This is a polar opposite of game number 1 as the Oni Warriors, Cuvo Fred notably, absolutely run over the early game here in this game. Solar Scarabs, a little fight back here and there, get a shutdown on the Cuvo Fred. But when that's what I'm giving you props for, the game probably didn't go much in your favor, and it didn't for the Solar Scarabs here. Trelly, the Oni Warriors bounce back, and they bounce back in a big way.
Yeah, they looked very solid. I'm not going to reveal too many strats, but as I was walking back, the coach was kind of going over some plays, and they were like, the one play, like, you guys messed up once, and it was Cuvo inted a little bit. That was it. That was the one complaint they had. So at that point, the Oni Warriors look very solid there. As long as they don't overstep and Cuvo gives the 8-0 bounty over. Besides that, they look very unstoppable, obviously. The whole squad looked good, but Cuvo, very high stat line. I believe Dardes went undying on the east side as well. There's only 5 kills the Scarabs could get, and most of those are going to go on a Neil.
Yeah, look, I wouldn't, unimpressed is not the right word. I haven't been blown away by Shiva Jungle in the games where we've seen it. I think this was really the first game where I said, all right, outside of the SEC, this is the first SPL game, I think, unless a game is escaping my memory, which it very well could be. The old noggin's not like it used to. The moment you turn 27, everything just goes out the window. But this was one of the first games, Trelly, that I can really remember where I'm legitimately impressed and feeling like Shiva Jungle was the reason the Oni Warriors were winning this game. Vote also had a much improved turnaround performance. In another game of this Chernobog. Now, a couple examples of it here today. Hunter's not forgetting what the global pressure and what some of the late game fighting can do for you.
Yeah, Vote went for the full crit build there with the fail 9 and everything. Was able to shine through just how much damage Chernobog can do off these late game rotations. You just ult up in the sky, fly in, and then you're able to just shred away. So a lot of damage built and a lot of shredding potential as well as that crit. So there's a few different options there, but I mean, it was just a good game, man. Answering back is the name of the game, right? You have this option where you lose game 1. Do you go into this sense where you're just like, oh man, we lost game 1. Do you make those adjustments? This time around, the Oni Warriors say yes, they are going to make those adjustments, and it's one of those things where I say, yeah, I think you might have to ban the Shiva Jungle away, because as you mentioned, Cuvo looked so solid on this pick.
Cuvo has been hard to figure out, and honestly, it almost feels somewhat Bolts-esque, where the Bolts just look so much better when Lasbra gets an aggressive early jungler. When Cuvo Fred has been playing this style of pick, in your face early and often, the Oni Warriors look so much better. I'm looking at Cuvo Fred's last 6 games, and there are a lot of very impressive KDAs. The only unimpressive KDA was the game 1 loss just now, 1-6 to the Solar Scarabs, but also at 4-6, lost to the win against the Kings, even with a 4-6 KDA. Other than that, Cuvo Fred has been on an absolute tear. And a lot of Hun bats, some Daji, Gilgamesh outside of the game 1 loss here has looked good. Shiva apparently is a pick that you need to look out for Cuvo Fred. Now, historically, Naja has been a strong pick for Scream.
Yeah.
Wasn't the move here in game number 2, though I admire the creativity. I wouldn't be surprised, Trelly, if the jungle battle continues on here in game 3.
I mean, I was very impressed with the Osiris. I think the Osiris did quite well, getting that early pressure. This time around, Scream on the Naja. I always like when he whips it out because it's interesting to see if he's able to set up for the squad. This time around didn't work, and I have to imagine back to the drawing board. Try something else this time around.
Because it has been standard outside of Morgan Lefay in the last 6. Bastet, Morgan Lefay, Gilgamesh, Thor, I suppose, is a little non-standard. Osiris and Naja have been Scream's last 6 picks. So no repeats for Scream in the last 6 games. I think Smart, the Oni Warriors here, are going to stick with the Olarun ban. It was the Olarun plus Yamoja that just felt like too much, and I think Inbound at this point has had enough. I'm not going to play Yamoja again. I also don't want Neilma to play Yamoja. And so the Scarabs end up taking Yam away. when she has been first pick for the Solar Scarabs in back-to-back games up to this point. And the Osiris will also get banned out. That seemingly solved a lot of the Oni Warriors' problems. So the kind of double pick ban here by the Solar Scarabs, where Dardes looks great on ESET in game 2. In the Solar Scarabs, they feel like taking ESET away, whether support or mid or potentially jungle is the answer.
But the Oni Warriors, they're not going to care too much. They want to grab that RDO right away here in that solo lane. So Nika's still going to be on one of those high-pressure solo laners that are just able to be so annoying. But AMC taking that away from Baronic is definitely going to be a strong option here.
Yep.
Usually they banned it away in game 1. This time they're just going to pick it, though. It could be a flex. Obviously, AMC is going to be solid in that long lane or the mid lane. So we'll have to see how that draft payers out. But ESET also notably could be inbound, could pilot it.
Yeah, it could be.
Scream could pilot it.
Yep.
Or Baronic could pilot it.
Or it could be Baronic as well. Yep, so there's flexibility here for the Solar Scarabs. I think you highlight it, but I want to really hammer it home here. I think the AMC kind of pick ban for the Oni Warriors is also really strong. It's been banned out against Baronic so many times because Baronic is so comfortable on these ability-based hunters out of mid and looks so good on those picks. And so I think that's a solid look here for the Oni Warriors, and could be a solid look for Dardes as well if that pick ends up going over to the mid lane. Cthulhu will be in the soul lane for the Solar Scarabs, and then as we've seen, Charybdis is the pick, but we don't know yet if that's going to be Baronic or Stewart because both have played Charybdis within this individual set. And so still some flexibility to be had, though ESET maybe now out of the mid lane conversation, depending on how the rest of this draft goes. And Capri, I think, got a lot of value for Neil Trelli, and this is a good run back for the Oni Warriors.
Yeah, I would say so. One thing that Cthulhu does not want to deal with is when you do isolate a pick and you're able to chase someone down to send to madness. The Scarab's Blessing is going to be very annoying, so that's going to be something that Scarity's going to have to play around. You know, if he does make that rotation over, are you going for one isolated pick, or are you going to spread out your damage onto a full brunt of targets? We'll have to see. But the Oni Warriors will target out Scream there, banning away that Kali, so they're not interested in the ESET jungle, or at least just in case it's not the ESET jungle. They want to make sure that Kali is not available. It would have made the AMC's life miserable for sure, so that's going to be a pretty annoying matchup to deal with. Take that away. But Solar Scarabs answer back immediately with the Shiva ban, which I honestly thought might have came a little bit sooner. It looks like Cuvo of Red was happy with the performance, but also wasn't in need to first pick that. They didn't value it that much, so now it's going to be taken away.
Right, more priority for the Oni Warriors in the rest of the draft. I can't believe that Kali has been 42%. So like just under half the time Kali is getting taken away from Scream, when it feels like nobody else in the league is going to play this pick. I find that interesting and also pretty cool that Scream is strong enough on that pick. Final ban for the Oni Warriors is the Ares. And so sensing that there still could be mid or jungle or support mindset out of this ESET, still the flexibility remains. And I wonder if you take another shot at Cubo Fred here, if you're the Solar Scarabs. Take another one of his strong picks away. But no, it's Dardes who ends up getting a ban sent his direction, as the Zeus is the ban choice for the Solar Scarabs.
So it looks like they might be leaning towards vote piloting the AMC here. At least the Solar Scarabs think so. And the Oni Warriors, pretty safe bet. I think Ares would have messed up a large portion of their composition here. The Cripple, RDO does not appreciate it, Capri doesn't appreciate it, and the Ultimate, I would say AMC does not appreciate it as well. So that's going to be something they didn't want to deal with. Medusa will be locked in. And this point, I think the AMC, pretty safe to assume, is going to be in that mid lane. Medusa and Capri in that duo lane. Strong duo there. But now we have to look at the opposite sides. Solar Scarabs have their two picks here, usually saving Screams for pretty often in the later stages of this draft. So that ESET, probably not Screams, just because that's how they usually do it. But they still, honestly, I'm not even sure they know just yet what they're going to be playing at this point, because the Naja was the last pick last time. Didn't really work out. This would be a nice answer back. Again, taking it away from Dardes was smart. Question is, where do they want to go with this?
Yeah, the only reason I don't think this would be a Scream pick is because they so often like leaving Scream's pick, they being the Scarabs, like leaving Scream's pick to later on in the draft. And so part of me thinks that for that reason, you're still looking for a jungler here. And I still think you're looking for an ADC here, to be honest. I have to think Baronic is going to be on this Charybdis, though Stewart looked good enough. I don't say that with very much confidence. It'll be mid or ADC, in my opinion, in one of these final two picks. Over on the other side, though, look at the Oni Warriors draft. I mean, between AMC and Medusa, double physical hunters. RDO, of course, will deal some magical damage. I suppose you can talk about Kepri's magical damage. Do you feel like the Oni Warriors, Trelly, need to draft some magical damage in the jungle one way or another and diversify up some of that damage in the team fight?
I definitely don't think they have to, but it wouldn't be a bad option. Hebo definitely still available, but the Kabrakan was banned away. I was going to say, and I wanted to touch on it before, but
no shot. This is
Cthulhu support Bobby has played already this
Wait a second.
year.
Wait, is this the one that he, like, was this the pick that he's, like, dying on this hill?
Yes, he said it was better than Ganesh support. I was trying to say before these picks came through just because I was like, wait a second, we can't even write off that this Cthulhu isn't in the support role just yet.
We should be able
No,
to, though,
I wish
because
we
he's
could.
so strong in solo.
I mean,
I haven't seen anyone play it outside of solo.
not only is he so strong in solo, he's so not strong in support. Inbound did not look good on this pick. I remember saying, like, are we good now? Can we finally say that this is not a support god? And he was like, no, he's better than Ganesh. So, I mean, we'll have to see. Right now, we see the Uller and the Charybdis.
Anything can work, right?
Yeah, there's a mishmash of areas where this could go, but we are going to see the last pick from the Oni Warriors. That makes a lot more sense to me. The Nemesis is going to be a strong option here, helping chunk down this Cthulhu and the tanks of the Solar Scarabs, but I mean, yeah, the Solar Scarabs have an interesting draft, and honestly, there's a few different roles that could be played here.
Wow, and Cuba Fred ends up getting one of his stronger picks, one of the early game aggressive picks in the Nemesis, and a pick that's great at killing off squishier targets. And so does this mean, Trelly, that it's an E-set jungle? I think Stewart's really, really solid on this Uller, and Charybdis mid, so it looks like E-set jungle for Scream, and so that now makes another new pick for Scream out of the jungle. You know, I guess I admire the creativity, because you are getting creative here if you're the Solar Scarabs. Game 1 works, Game 2 does not. It's time to throw a curveball here when you're down in the count. I guess batters are down in the count, but your backs are against the wall.
Right.
And the Solar Scarabs are throwing something funky out there to try to get it to work in Game 3.
I would be remiss, however, if I didn't mention that Inbound also played Amaterasu support. So there's...
Yeah, there was a world where I thought it could be Ama support as well.
I mean, when I think of Scary D, I think of some legendary escapes on the Amaterasu. So I would honestly, and I hate to say this, I would rather see Scary D on the Ama, which in turn puts the Cthulhu in that lane.
Well, we've speculated long enough, and
Right.
production is throwing us a life raft. It is indeed Amaterasu support for Inbound. He'll be playing Ama support going into game number 3 here. So Cthulhu will still be where the strongest Cthulhu performances have been.
I mean, I'm happy
and
about
that's out
that.
of the solo lane. Amaterasu will not be where the strongest Ama games have been, and that's over in support. Do your best here, Trelly. Give me some value in Amaterasu support up against what we assume is a Khepri and a Medusa.
Well, I'm in hog heaven right now because I don't have to tell you why Cthulhu's support is bad. I can tell you why Ama support actually does have some benefits.
There we go, great.
The auto attack passive to shred objectives is always going to be solid. You have the auras to speed up your team. You can also have the aura to have some damage to your team, as well as a great engage with dazzling offensive. So there is some tools for Ama support that I think is very strong, and you're able to use that a little bit more effectively. Again, the Cthulhu support has its uses, but right now we know. So Amaterasu, I think, is going to be good for that objective shred, as well as the fact that it's a solid engage.
Oh, the Solar Scarabs are giving us something to look forward to as we head on to our final game of the day, game number 3 between the Warriors and the Scarabs.
We're going to have Jam-Mac and Gore here one final time to see who is finally going to take home the crown, at least in this matchup between the Scarabs and the Warriors. I got to say, production is throwing so many bones over to some of these other guys over on the desk. When I'm sitting here and trying to figure out what god's going where, who's getting what pick, it's dead air silence for me all the time. But for some reason,
now this would be because you're a roommate with Jithens, and
That's what it
therefore
is.
It's like vendetta. Like, oh, yeah, if you didn't do your dishes last night, he's not telling you about where these swaps are going. You forgot to clean up X, Y, or Z in the apartment. Sorry, man, you're not going to figure it out. It didn't even, they were talking so much about the Ama support, didn't even occur to me that did mean we were getting, in fact, the E-set jungle. This is a fun comp, man. This is going to be a fun game.
If it's one
or
thing,
tragic.
that's also a fair point here. If there's one thing that I've learned this season between the Solar Scarabs and the Jade Dragons as two different teams, you never know what you're going to get with these guys. They're always going to keep it fun, and they're going to keep you guessing at almost every stage of the game out here, more often than not. But with that, yes, it will be Inbound on the Ama support with not a Gauntlet of Thieves start, not a Sovereignty start, but a round shield for a first item.
You know what? You're just from what I can tell right now, again, swapping a little bit of the starter item just because you're not going to be getting a lot of experience on your own. You're trying to let that go over to Stewart. Otherwise, maybe just try to play similarly as you would otherwise. I don't know. It'll be a fun one to watch. Again, Inbound has done it in the past, and we'll figure that one out. It was an interesting conversation, I think, that Shelly and Dave had, just because, like, is it worthwhile? Like, Scary D's Amaterasu is just phenomenal, and it is maybe one of the best ones that you get to see outside of probably Nika's on the other side. And so it's something that, feels good over there. I personally don't like Cthulhu support more than anything, and so I think that I like the swap up they've gone for, and it does create an interesting dynamic over here. I mean, you have to think about what all that specifically Amaterasu can do for her team. Again, a little bit of prot shred where you can get in there and get aggressive and set up specifically someone like Stewart early on, especially on an Uller, as well as a huge team fight stun. I mean, like a lot of the things that you're going to get out of a frontline Ama from solo, you're still going to get out of the support role. It's just whether or not this early game is going to be as comfortable for you. And so far, they've been able to run at least a little bit of the lane themselves.
I do have some worries for Scary D as we start getting towards these late game team fights. I mean, we've already got the Amusing Cobb. That god's going to be good at shredding some of those prods, just to be the way to Stinger. You have a second Hunter here who's currently being attacked by Stewart. Some good damage on this Uller. But you have the second Hunter in Medusa, who's going to be building kind of this more pen tree that we've been seeing out here. And then you've also got a Nemesis who used to, on release of Cthulhu, be kind of that, not really hard counter, but be that big counter factor when he goes up into that ultimate, being able to shred all those prots and all that HP. There's a lot of shred that's going to go up against Scary D. Yeah. I'm worrisome for him past the 25-minute mark.
Honestly, maybe even earlier than the 25-minute mark, right? I think any team fight, if they are collected on the Warriors, then you have to worry about Nim ult into Dardes and vote damage, right? And like you said, it's just going to be a lot. At the 25-minute mark, it's probably going to be, maybe even easier for them. We'll have to watch, I think, with great interest, Scary D's build, because that's going to be crucial to them. Items that you don't typically think of at this point. Like, I see a lot of attack speed on one side. I see the Nemesis, the AMC, the Medusa. I'm starting to think, like, man, maybe I want a Witchblade, or somebody's going to want one eventually to try and help alleviate that.
Scary D's going to want some help, and he'll get it from the Tier 1 tower, plus his own ultimate, giving him a lot of extra that HP, and mostly just that threatening presence. That's going to be a big ult down on the side of the solo lane for the Skiller Scarab. Scream rotates over, beats. Will immune out the Spirit Ball from Scream, so Vote will be sitting nicely under the tower, but not level 5 yet, so no Petrify available.
I always forget how big Cthulhu is. Like, we've seen a lot of Cthulhu. Like, it's not
massive.
even like it's not even like a thing that we've like, oh, I haven't seen Cthulhu in a while. Like, we saw him like today, yesterday. Like, I see him a ton. And I always forget how big he gets in his ult. And the first thing I thought of was how fun it would be if he could smack towers around a little bit.
God.
Unfortunately, that might not work out well for him. Good news is he can smack around pretty much anything and everything else. And it's going to be fun to watch. You're already getting, I think, though, an impact from Cuvo. This Nemesis is one of his most picked gods. Very good performance track record on this pick. For a while last year, if Cuvo wasn't playing either Nemesis or Serket, I didn't really think that the Warriors were going to win. And for the most part, that ended up being true for a lot of their records. I think there were, again, a few wins here and there that made the big difference for them. But, you've got an E-set on the other side. Like, if you're Nemesis, this is easy for you right now because you don't have to worry too much about what this mage is going to bring. I don't know when Scream is going to be able to start getting aggressive. Most of the time that we've seen in E-set jungle, it's been in the SEC. And some of that doesn't translate as well up to the SBL, right? Like, hey, just because you have Spirit Ball and can walk at somebody does not necessarily mean that your gank is going to go incredible for you. But it does still bring, I think, a lot of the merits that, like, a mid-lane E-set could bring, or even a support E-set could bring. First off, the ult. It's still there. Turns out, doesn't change when you move it in rolls. So that works out pretty well for you. But the other thing that matches it up with mid a little bit better, it's still going to be a lot of damage like we've seen already today. So I'm expecting a lot from Scream. I just don't know when it's going to happen.
Veronic back on this Charybdis, though, another point that kind of got brought up here.
Love it.
It's a god that he's had a lot of success with back in Season 8, had a good game number 1 with it. But might be in a little bit of danger here. Ult from Cuvo Fred on top of Scream. Veronic has to use the ultimate to get away, but circle protection down means that Scream should be fine. Nika is rooted and stunned in place and will go down. Veronic turns that back around with the help of his team to get first blood. Cuvo blinks under the tower, dashes through, and trades it a 1-for-1, getting down Baronic.
Scream doesn't have a lot of mana to work with. In fact, well, let's just go ahead and cut it. It's none. There's going to be the stun from inbound. They're looking for more.
Scary D walks on over, and that's a kill for the solo laner now. Solar Scarabs have turned this one back or around. They get first blood. They get return killed right after, and then Scary D puts one in for himself up on the column. 1-0-1 in the solo lane, and 0-2 now for Scream.
And I think it's a good start. You know, maybe you'd like one of those two to end up being a kill in your favor, but I don't think it's the end of the world. Good aggression, good control, and I want to talk more about it. You had mentioned, you know, Baronic back on this Charybdis. I think, and I'd have to double check this, if it's not every game, I'm pretty sure most games that they've played where they've won on Charybdis have been played by Baronic. I think that when Stewart has played it, it hasn't been as successful for them, and I don't think that's necessarily a knock on Stewart as much as it is that I think that when it is brought into the mid lane, whatever it is that they give Stewart alongside that just tends to work in tandem better than throwing Baronic onto a different mage and making Stewart play the Charybdis. So I love bringing it right back to the mid lane. Does end up falling, but that's a deep dive for Kivo, and he gets punished for it. So it's not really like it's the end of the world for Baronic. And so far, looking like a very similar build to what we saw in game number 1, right? Starting off with the Brawlers, probably going into something like the Toxic Blade. A lot of attack speed and some decent damage that's going to be applicable early on. Then you add the CC that Scream is bringing on this E-set, and all of a sudden they're a fearsome 2 standing in the middle.
Let's see how cool it is looking down the right side of the Warriors builds and seeing 3 separate stacking items, all different stacking items, by the way, right on one on top of the other there, just to get that
is
going.
like very satisfying.
It is really cool. They're missing what, like a Warlock staff and like a Book of Thoth or a Soul Eater kind of to round all that to keep them at least all different ones here. We won't see any of those ones coming out. Not in this game at the very least
And
here.
definitely not in the column.
Probably, yeah, definitely not in the same column. We're well past
They've ruined that part.
Yeah, that one, well, they could technically sell the item and buy it and then have to spend a little bit more gold to buy the other item back.
You know what? They are absolutely, like, physically capable of doing that.
Wouldn't recommend it, though.
No.
Probably not recommended. Not the most gold-efficient thing that you could do. But Stewart, level 10 here on the Zooler, has gotten some good pressure up against
Why'd
both.
you lose game 3? It was for the memes, man. We did it. It was really funny. I promise.
We had to get those stacking items all in the same column, my man. We had to get every single one of them here. The only Warriors stepping up. Try and find inbound. They will get the pull back in. Spirit Ball will stop Neil Ma, who's lost a lot of his health. Has to use that ultimate just on himself, but Scream sitting inside. That circle of protection will get the healing back up. Neil Ma can walk himself right on out, but it did cost him his Scarab's blessing to find a way out.
This is going to be inbound getting aggressive. They've got a lot of stuff. That's a ton of damage. And that is maybe my favorite aspect. We talk a lot, I think, about what E-Set can bring. I'm a huge fan of Spirit Ball because it does more damage at max range than it does. So that, you know, the longer you charge it up, the better it's going to be. And that just makes me really happy. It's max level here already, but you can see that. So up to 1.5 seconds scaling, but 1.5x damage power that it's going to do at max range. So a lot that's going to hit for. 70% scaling on that one. It feels good to hit that ability at long range, and being able to have that from your jungler, like, that's a huge chunk that you're probably not expecting if you're on the Warriors, and then you're getting stunned on top of it. That makes it very easy for, like, Baronic, Stewart, or Scary D or inbound to either find the kill, or if it's either the latter two I just mentioned, then finding even more CC to lock them down.
Man, we just had the Warriors in to do the most satisfying God's abilities in the game. I don't remember where they ranked E-Set. Maybe Trelly could shine a little bit of light one back on there for me. Or maybe I guess I could have just checked in and, you know, we had the screenshot of it somewhere in our server or whatnot here. But I agree with you there. I think a max range Spirit Ball might be one of the greatest feelings in the world to hit as far as Smite is concerned here.
I don't know, because, like, it's so weird, especially when you bring it into, like, the conversation of the tier list, because then you have to think, well, there's also, like, Raw Snipe, Rom Snipes.
Oh, man.
Giannis Snipe from across the map feels really good. And so I think it's, like, it's up there. But I guess if, like, those are S tier, I'd probably put it in, like, A.
I don't know.
If I was, if I'm making it.
I think they rated the Giannis Snipe, like, really low down. I don't think they gave it a whole lot of credibility to hit the Giannis Snipe.
It feels pretty good. Well, it's like, if you're right, like, if I'm standing right next to you and I just point-blank shotgun, that's not great. But if I'm in left and I kill you in right, that feels awesome.
That's cool. That's like your highlight moments. It's one of those ones that we'd catch the highlight for, you know, to have it. Hey, he got a kill. His name is up here. Show us what happened. You just see him fire it off, and he just walks away and just keeps doing his own thing. And all of a sudden, boop, name pops up, top of the screen. Always feels good there. But 2-1 is the Solar Scarabs here, just 11 minutes into the game. Gold and XP hasn't gone very far, only about
No,
600
not at all.
up for the Scarabs, 1K in XP. So it's been a much slower pace
Yeah.
in this game than we've seen the last
And
two.
I'll say, hey, good news for both teams. This is the first time at 11 minutes that neither of them feel like they're like getting knocked out of the game at this point, right? I mean, in game one, the Scarabs had a very comfortable lead at this point. In game two, the Warriors had a very comfortable lead at this point. And so we're finally at a spot where it's still relatively even. You're not looking towards like insane Fury plays just yet. I think you're still looking for where Cuvo is going to be able to find presence. Nemesis isn't necessarily the one, I'm going to say not the one to set up kills, not necessarily in the sense of kicking things off, because a Nim ult is definitely how you want to start a lot of fights. But in terms of finding the CC, the way that we got to see a lot as with the Shiva in last game, where it's like, I'm going to go and pull 3 people into a single spot or get a really sick knock-up in the jungle, it's going to be a little different for them here. Maybe some slows, some good damage to start things off. But I think the Warriors are really kind of waiting like Neil as the initiator or Nika when Nika starts rotating in as the initiator, whereas Scream can really start kicking things off, Scary D, Inbound can all start fights. And they might actually have one coming to them anyway.
Yeah, Inbound walks up by himself. The honey and the bees will be enough to petrify. Maybe a bit overkill by the vote there. He's not even going to get the damage to get the credit for the kill. So the only Warriors answer back as Inbound, for some reason, all by himself, just walks up to the obelisk to try and steal those offerings.
Well, and this has been a discussion I think ongoing, is whether or not is your life worthwhile for the obelisk. Maybe the answer to that is yes. Is it worthwhile for a Fury and the obelisk? Probably not.
No. Circle Protection will force the leash of the Gold Fury, but maybe instead a turn onto screen. Beads go through for the E set. A dash in by Cuvo and an acid spray by Vote will take down the jungler. But now Veronic and Stewart are back in, but so is Nika. He is right at the forefront of this fight. Stewart rooted out. But with Inbound and Scary D now on the rotation, the Warriors cannot safely do this Fury. They've turned their sights over to Scary D, who immediately goes up in the sense of the management. Cubo is slowly chopping away at him, but the rest of the Warriors are not willing to commit into this Cthulhu. They'll let Scary D and the rest of the Scarabs back off.
But look at that damage onto the Cthulhu. Like, Scary D, it's enough to stop him from getting the Fury. That's a huge win, admittedly, just because you still lose 2 in the process. You stifle what could have been an otherwise amazing team fight for the Warriors that would have grown into something maybe a little more massive. But you still get to see a lot of damage from the Warriors onto Cthulhu. They don't get the kill there, but you get to see what that combination can do. And in just a few minutes, that's going to be a death for Scary D if you're not careful. If you get too aggressive in moments like that, it will be very easy for the Warriors to chase you down as a 5-man and absolutely burn through you, ult or not. And so I think that's something that the Scarabs have to be aware of. I think positioning right now has to be a huge thing. I think there's a lot in game 2 that can be chalked up to, hey, this fight could have gone towards the Scarabs, but Inbound got picked about 10 seconds before anybody else could show up, if not a little bit longer. Seeing that happen again here, that's where my mind is at. I think they have a ton, we saw it in game 1, ton of potential for the top end. It's just making sure little things like that don't give the Warriors an advantage that otherwise is just unnecessary for the Scarabs to give up.
Let's talk about something being picked up a little bit early here. I mean, back in the days of the persistent teleport meta for the Soul Laners, that was something that we saw them upgrading by level 7, level 8. This time around, Scary D, not the persistent teleport, heroic teleport, which has been making a much bigger rise as of late. But he's got it only 14 minutes in the game. I'm not even sure he used it during that last rotation over towards gold, but it's not often we see this one of the 2 teleports leveled up this early.
And it's mainly, you can look at it, I think I saw, slow immunity in there, but realistically it's, hey, you get 40 prots after you teleport for 10 seconds. You teleport into the back of a team fight, guess what? They're not gonna kill you for a little while. You've got a little bit more going for you. And as a Cthulhu, as a solo laner in general, that just feels really good to be able to find the back line and be that oppressive in terms of what your presence can bring.
We do have a Gold Fury going the way of the Scarabs, the first major objective really going down here. I guess aside from the Pyromancer that did get picked up just a little earlier on. That one is coming right back up here. But the Scarabs have been on top of this neutral farm here in game number 3. Very slight lead in the gold department towards the side of the Scarabs, even despite the Warriors having that extra kill. And it's a little bit of a wait around here by this Pyromancer. Neither team pulling the objective just yet.
And I think this is probably a good call around here. Scream, He doesn't have Circle of Protection. If you fight over this, it's going to be a hard commit, and inbound goes in just enough. They've had a good engage here for the Scarabs. I wouldn't mind seeing them maybe step it up.
Scream not able to steal that one away. Oni Warriors do grab the Pyromancer, so the Scarabs' consolation prize will be their own Greater Scorpion. That one will even the gold right back up here. Stewart and Vote still battling it out in this lane here. Stewart even hitting level 17 already. Vote has been struggling to keep up in XP in game 1 and game 3 here. I mean, game 1 against the Ola run, we saw Vote constantly under the tower, was constantly sitting a level and a half down. It's ringing true yet again here in game 3, but this time it's with the Uller instead of Ola run.
And honestly, I think that this is a good spot to be in. Like, look at it, like the build that you're getting for Uller. You're going to hit hard when you rotate in. Is it going to hit as hard? Like, in a 1v1 right now, I think ability-wise, you get a good volley, good stun to start things off. Hail of arrows again, bladed arrow. Probably going to kick things off really well against Vote. But in terms of just like what auto attacks, damage you're going to be doing along with lifesteal, Vote probably sustains just enough in that to make sure things go well. But when you get to teamfight stage, Stewart's going to be nuts. I think the damage that's going to be just thrown out, whether it's onto objectives, but more through all of the players that are stacked up by the Warriors, we're going to see that really start to climb. And even right now, I mean, he's not too far down on the charts. He's the top for the Scarabs. And so that creates a fun dynamic, I think, to watch where this Uller is going to end up, alongside the Charybdis, just because she's pretty low on the charts. I want to keep my eyes on that, like, around, let's round it up to 3K damage now.
Scream missed the Spirit Ball. That could be the death here of the jungler. Indeed it will. Dardes to deal the final blow and take Scream down, putting up a 4th kill now for the Oni Warriors. But looking over here towards the mid lane, a bit of a scuffle starting up. There are 4 Warriors in front of this tier 1 tower. Only 3 Scarabs and Scary D now wrapping around the backside, but Cubo Fred has met them there. Tier 1 tower stands absolutely no chance against a double hunter. Neil Ma is also being shredded out by the hunters that are coming from the side of the Solar Scarabs. That'll be an end to that engagement. But talking about, kind of Scary D over here on this Cthulhu, we talked about him earlier on into the game. Some of our worries going up against this double hunter and a Nemesis comp. Starting to build up against him. I mean, Jade Emperor's Crown reduced a lot of that physical power coming up his way, but also that Witchblade just to slow down that attack speed.
I'm happy. I want to say I willed it into existence, but realistically, it's just a good pickup up against this team, right? Having the physical power reduced means that Cuvo, Dardes, Vote, the people who are trying to kill you, Scary D, aren't going to hit as hard. Plus, you get a lot of health, you get some physical prots, and 10% CCR. That's going to be a good number for you. The Witchblade right beside it, the attack speed is the biggest thing, right? Just being able to reduce that. It's got a lot of cool numbers on there as well. I think the health is probably going to be helpful, but really the aura on this item is maybe one of my favorites. It's up there with like the upgraded Horrific that ends up coming through. And so it's another item here that I think alongside where Inbound is going in his relics, it's going to help stifle a little more of what these double hunters can do. Because as you had highlighted during that tier 1, they're burning objectives pretty quickly. Tier 1s at this point, gonna die fast. Honestly, Furies, Pyromancers, probably gonna die fast. Fire Giants might take a smidge longer than others, but otherwise it's still a lot of damage. The same thing can be applied to tanks, and I think that they are itemizing in a way that is gonna help slow that down. You see at least some similar items, one there for Nika. And so similar idea with both of these teams having double hunter. It really could all just in the blink of an eye shift. I mean, even with the small lead, like in negligible lead, let's just call it that the Warriors have, you could slip up around a Fire Giant and then all of a sudden all of your towers are gone. And that's true for either of these squads right now just because of the comps.
Security will go back to base, level 18 on the Cthulhu. What will his next item be towards? We'll find out in a moment as the Oracle Harpies do go down to the Solar Scarabs. Security is investing a lot into his physical protection between the Emperor's Crown, the Witchblade, and now this Tier 2 Breastplate. He is going to do everything in his power to make sure that Cuvo, Dardes, and Vote are hitting for as little as possible up against him.
I mean, they are about to, like, they are going to bare fist punch a brick wall. Like, that is what they're starting to approach. Granted, you have to factor in Cuvo's ult into that.
Well, this Primal Fury is going down quickly. The Solar Scarabs will drop it as well. Just the same that the Oni Warriors are dropping Inbound's health bar. He's barely alive, but not for much longer. Vote finds the first kill of the engagement. Scary D finds a 4-man knockup in the backline, but he is still eating a lot of damage even in this ultimate form. Turns around for the swipe But 4 versus 5, and look at Cubo wrapping around the backside towards the towers. Doesn't have the team to go in with him. Instead, the Oni Warriors will take their 1 pick. They'll back away and maybe even start up this Primal.
I mean, it's still a big play. I actually love what Scary D does there. Teleports to the back line, gets those prots online, blinks forward to get into the engagement. And the Scarabs are still going to go for a steal.
Warriors do get the Primal, though. No steal from Stewart. Very close on that Ullr, but not close enough this time around. 5 kills up versus 2 for the Oni Warriors, and now we see our first quote-unquote significant gold lead so far this game at around 2,500 is the farthest that we've been able to make it up until this point. Same with the XP. That one over about that same area, 23, 2,400, bouncing back up and down. So what we were seeing in 5-6 minutes in games 1 and 2 has taken us nearly 20 minutes to get here now. But the Oni Warriors finally with this small lead, but I mean, at this stage of the game, that feels like nothing.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. You know, you're 2,500 at 21 minutes doesn't really mean a whole ton. Maybe if you can boost it over 3K, which it looks like the Warriors are going to be able to, you start to feel a little more confident in it. But, you know, and you kind of mentioned it early on in the game, that's the difference of tons of items. And now Inbound's in trouble.
Inbound is not so much in trouble now that he's just absolutely dead. Dardez with that stinger is chunking through the health bar of the support. Only has that Berserkers for a true physical protection item. That Gauntlet Thieves giving him a little bit, but not enough, man. The damage output from the Warriors is astronomical. Scary D can't even get into the ultimate form before he gets shredded away by Vote. Nika chasing down Stewart. It's a stun on the carry and a death on the carry. Baronic's got to use the ult just to get away from Nika, who will continue the charge down the middle lane towards the mid laner. But as soon as Baronic gets out of that ultimate, he's going to go down with those relics right behind.
And look, Scream,
Oh,
I
no.
love you try so hard, and you don't get very far this time around. Tier 2, I mean, with this amount of timer, I think the Warriors just win.
They can just say it here. It's only Inbound alive. He's up behind them, but what is Inbound going to do? Nothing. Nika can just zone him out by himself. Middle Phoenix goes down. The Oni Warriors in one team fight with only a 3K gold lead pick all 5 of the Scarabs. They pick off the Titan, and they end the game just after the 23-minute mark. Man, what just happened?
Look, I think what we get to see is the circumstance is actually very similar. You go back to the Warriors win up against the Kings in game 1 last week, and sometimes that one pick at the very beginning of a fight is all you need. In this case, it was they got rid of Inbound, and then it was so much easier because it's a 4v5. They feint a little bit backwards towards the FG, and the Scarabs are presented an option. Come fight 4v5, let us get the Fire Giant. They opt to fight 4v5, but they don't do it at the same time. Scary D goes in, and with no other frontline around him, he just gets shredded, right? He didn't have his teleport available, or if he did, he didn't use it. So a lot of those extra prots he would have had weren't there. Didn't go into the ult super early. Might not have had it. I can't even remember at that point because he just died so quickly that I just had to erase the Cthulhu from my mind. And from that point, it was just domino effect. It was just 1 to 1 to 1, right? Chase him down and kill him. So I think that it is simply some small errors. I think it's the same thing that happened in game 2 that ballooned a lead for the Warriors. It's just the Scarabs sometimes overcommitting to something that maybe doesn't need to be there, and unfortunately for them, that loses them the lead and loses them the game.
I remember joking with you at the start of the game, man, once 25 minutes hit, it's going to look really rough for Scary D against these 3. Well, we didn't hit 25 minutes. At 18, 19, 20 minutes is when it was already looking rough for that solo laner. The solo Scarabs fall down here. Oni Warriors with a big win in game 3 means they take the set. We're going to take it to a break. We'll come back to the desk and take it home.
Three, two, one.
back-to-back games, the Oni Warriors win in Game 3 and the set. Over to the Oni Warriors over the Solar Scarabs. They keep their winning ways going here. Solar Scarabs, they have a miraculous Game 1. The Oni Warriors, I think there's a little bit of spirit breaking that goes on in Game number 2. And then on to Game number 3 we go. And that's where the Oni Warriors, Trelly, are really able to turn things around, really get the ball rolling here, and put a successful performance together in Game 3.
It's interesting because the Oni Warriors, they drafted this double ADC comp, which we talk a lot about the fact that you think this double Hunter comp, it's not going to come online until late game, but they were able to wrap this one pretty early. I mean, it was a fair game. It wasn't like they had an incredible lead going into that FG fight. It was pretty even, but the double ADCs, it just looks so solid. Darda's on this AMC and vote on this Medusa.
It was the Medusa. You and I had the weirdest short-term memory last week. It was like five seconds from the game being over. Like, what did Vote just play for whatever reason? Couldn't figure it out. Medusa ended up being a good look for Vote here in Game number 3, the double ADC. And remember, we were excited about kind of the double pick ban-esque style of that AMC pick. You take it away from Baronic on one hand, and you give it over to Dardes there on the other hand. And it was an interesting way in the way that this game ended because, don't get it wrong, the Oni Warriors had a lead going into this end game fight right around this Fire Giant, right? I mean, there's 3,000 gold, 3,000 gold. But it's just the way the death timers work and how quickly everyone seemed to die, Trelly, where one fight is all the Oni Warriors really needed down the stretch. Loved what I saw from both of the carries today. I think Neoma put together a couple good games for the Oni Warriors here as well. And I can't believe it. The Oni Warriors, who struggled in Season 8, tied for first place now in the SPL.
Yeah, it is a 4-way tie right now? But
technically 4-way tie, but first place nonetheless.
No, they're still looking great. I'm not going to say they weren't. Even going into this, I was talking about, like, they've come a long way for sure, because now that they're all here in studio, they've been looking phenomenal, and they're still looking very hot, obviously. They are off a solid win streak here, but the Solar Scarabs did what they usually do, right? Where they get those early leads, they were able to take Game 1, but then after that, just couldn't find that late game team fight. And I think the Oni Warriors just had a really solid team comp here. Giving up AMC is just nuts. I guess you want to try to get Baronic on that AMC, but right now Dardes looked so solid on that pick, and you just the prot shred for your other ADC is also going to be so solid. So they drafted very well as well.
Look, all I'm going to say is I'm 2 for 2 on my predictions so far here today, and I even did myself one better. And we'll talk about this as we get to the schedule here in a little bit. Chuckles, head coach of the Oni Warriors, with me now for the post-game interview.
Hello.
Congrats, and hello, first and foremost. Talk to me about the adaptations from Game 1, because it felt like pick ban-wise, Oleron and Osiris were kind of immediate bans in the first 3 for Games 2 and 3. What goes into that decision? Was it just too annoying to deal with in Game 1?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think coming off Game 1, we kind of just got ran over a bit.
Yeah.
They just had a bit too much pressure, so we just looked at those picks and were like, get that out of here, get that out of here. And we'll play our game, because we know that once we're the ones making the plays, then we can actually play the game.
Yeah, you kind of steamrolled them in Game 2, huh? And then maybe more ADC meta in general. Feels like I saw more Jingwei and Chernabark today than I expected to. Why do you think we're seeing a little bit more of them in the meta, at least today?
I mean, they're just safe. They just sit in lane. They're able to, get out when they get pressured. And yeah, like you've noticed, you'll see the Kerns and the Medusas are sort of less valued right now, just because the ADC lane is a little bit easy to kill.
Sure.
And in general, you just kind of value that safety a bit more right now.
Now, this is a high-level question. I was talking to Trelly about it. The Warriors, you guys had your moments in Season 8. Technically a 4-way tie now. I don't know how all the head-to-head, plus-minus, things like that are working. But as of right now, you're in a 4-way tie for first place in the SPL. Are you surprised with the speed at which the Warriors have turned around their win-loss tendencies, I suppose, as a team?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely feels good.
Yeah.
To get some dubs as opposed to just not being able to last year. But yeah, I mean, our process of like learning and growing and taking what we can now that we're actually able to play is really good. Yeah.
Well, look, Destiny feels like it's in your hands at this point. I feel like most of the teams have maybe 1 or 2 final games to go. Real good look at a first-place finish here in Phase 1.
Here's hoping.
Yeah, here's to open. Congrats, Chuckles, and thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Oni Warriors continue their winning ways, and as we mentioned in the interview there, a four-way tie technically to the top of the SPL right now. And look, we talked so much over the years. It's been many moons over the last year about how once the Oni Warriors got in studio, we expected to see some growth. I will put myself out there. I had some doubts about, I don't know if it's going to change all that much, and apparently it has over their last few games. 2 3-game sets today in the SPL, and we've got a whole lot more SPL to go this weekend. 2 sets tomorrow, starting with the Valhalla Valkyries and the Atlantis Leviathans, a team trying to keep pace with this top of the pack. There's a world where if the Leviathans win, it is the world where if the Leviathans win tomorrow, there'll be 5 teams at 4-2 on top of the standings. And then the Olympus Bolts and the Solar Scarabs will fight after that. If the Olympus Bolts win, they'll be in sole control of first place. Followed by 3 sets on Sunday, starting at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Kings, Valks, Leviathans, Dragons. That one's going to be some fun. And then the Titans up against the Oni Warriors. A whole lot of top 6 matchups going on here down the stretch, Trelly. And the standings as a result of all of the back-and-forth games that we've seen now look like this. And I haven't seen this. I did Season 7, Season 8, and now Season 9 of SMITE. I've never seen anything like this through the amount of games that we have had, where 4 teams are tied for first through 6 games. This is not like week 2 where half the teams have won a couple, half the teams have lost. Like we are almost done with the phase. Everyone playing everyone near every single time so far, or at least once so far. And we got 4 teams tied up at 4-2, and the Leviathans, with a win over the Valkyries, who haven't won a set yet, would make 5 teams tied at the top at 4-2. And the Camelot Kings are somehow in 6th place at 3-3. The standings are very indicative of a very competitive league.
It's a great time to be a SMITE fan, no doubt. And honestly, sometimes you get into a Twitch chat argument where someone's like, this is the best team in the league. This is the best team in the league. This is the only time where you could honestly make an argument for 6 or 7 teams, and they'd say, this is the best team in the league, and you can't even look at them like, what are you talking about? You know what you're talking about. You could make an argument for any of them right now. They're all looking very solid. But as you mentioned, the standings are very important. You want to be trying to get to that top 6 spot. So the Solar Scarabs taking an L here, not a great look for that, because right now they're sitting at now number 7.
Well, the Solar Scarabs only have 1 more game to play left this phase, so they, I believe, won't be able to break into that top 6. Will still be at Masters no matter what. It's all about learning for the Solar Scarabs moving forward and defending the top of the table for the rest of the 6 teams in the SPL right now. We had back-to-back 3-game sets today, 2 more sets tomorrow. SCC starts at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. SPL will start up at 1 p.m. Eastern Time with the Valhalla Valkyries and the Atlantis Leviathans. On behalf of myself, Trelly Relly, all the other casters, everyone back in production, thanks for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.